traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Silks, and the Snix people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. I've received no late items. I could have an adoption of the agenda as circulated. Thank you. That's been moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Pinero. All those in favor? And that carries. No previous minutes. Boy, we're all up to date. And that takes us to item 6. We're having a workshop education session on human resources as we had previously arranged. So I'd like to ask Gabe to come up to one of the hot seats, please. He's the manager of human resources, and he's going to provide an update to council on the city's staff recruitment and retention efforts. So welcome, Gabe. Good to see you again. Boy, two kind of meetings in a row.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. Am I ready to just get started?
That's it. It's all yours.
Is there no longer the mic here?
No, the mic's
Okay.
you just
It's magic.
Right.
speak it.
Just be careful what you say.
Yeah,
So we don't have this presentation.
that's correct.
I'm happy to share it
It's okay.
afterwards.
I'll stop looking for it is what I'm going to say.
Okay, Mayor and Council, it's my pleasure to be here on behalf of the city's HR team to talk a little bit about our recruiting and retention strategies. Just to kind of preface that, I would say, the HR team does a lot of work, and it's not only focused on recruiting and retention, but recruiting and retention is a very important issue. It's a timely issue in some ways. I understand Council has some interest in this topic, so it's great to be here today to kind of talk a little bit about the current landscape and what we're doing to make sure that we remain competitive in this way. Obviously, the city's staff are one of the city's greatest assets, and so our job is to make sure that we're bringing in the best staff out there, and we're finding ways to keep them here and to make them want to grow their career here. So I'm just going to touch a little bit on broader market trends and what we've seen in the city over the last year or so. I'll talk a little bit about some changes we made and how we came to those changes. So where do we get that information from, and what did we hear? And then I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing this year as well. And then I'll talk a little bit as well about where we may have some limitations, namely with kind of our compensation side of things. So broader market trends. I'm going to go over this pretty quickly because I'm sure you're all aware of this stuff based on your own own work outside of the city. These factors are things that the whole world or all of Canada has experienced. So this is what we're seeing broadly. We're seeing an aging workforce in Canada. We're seeing the post-COVID effects where people maybe have reprioritized how they treat careers. So maybe they're jumping around from careers more frequently. Maybe they're taking sabbatical leaves and going to travel the world, that type of thing. We're seeing changing expectations in terms of flexible and remote work. So in a town like Nelson, all of a sudden, the people looking for jobs have a lot more potential employers. So there's more competition in that sense. There's competition for talent amongst municipalities. So again, in our case, that would be competing with other local governments in the region, and we've certainly seen that. There's, again, that generational trends in job hopping. And finally, again, nothing new for council, a housing crisis and a cost of living crisis. And that certainly comes up when we're trying to help a candidate relocate to the area. This is just two quick slides that kind of illustrate what I was saying there. This is from a UBCM report on the labor market. So this simply shows that in terms of the amount of Canadians, this is all of Canada that are retiring. We saw a little blip there during COVID in 2021 and 2022, but then that number shoots up to 300,000 in 2023. And Labour Canada has said they expect that number to be close to 400,000 in the next few years. So we are seeing a lot of Canadians that are hitting that retirement age. And who's there to replace them? So this is a graphic just for British Columbia. It shows the number of job openings there in green. So we're looking at about 97,000, or in that high 90 range of jobs that are coming online each year in British Columbia. And meanwhile, in terms of people entering the job market in British Columbia, we're at about half of that. So as you can tell, again, this report was from last year, but we're expecting more people to retire and fewer people to enter the workforce. When we talk about broader market trends, I should just say that changes quickly. And in the last month or so, there's been a lot of fears about the economy in the world, in Canada and the United States. We'll see how that plays out, but for now, we can really only comment on what we know.
Councillor Woodward, then Councillor Payne.
Thank you. So I was curious, I mean, do you think this instability, say in North America, like globally, but I'm wondering if instability actually makes people stay at their jobs more, or rather than being, because when the economy is good and hopping around, you feel comfortable, I can get a job there, good. But I'm wondering, as things tighten up, that
Anecdotally, I would say yes, that people will be a bit more conservative when the job market is tighter, when the economy is struggling. But it's really hard to know how things will shake out. And so COVID is a great example. We didn't know what the impacts of COVID would be, but actually it created a really strong job market for employees, right? And so right now we don't know what the impacts of the trade war might be, but we also don't know if that trade war will actually last for very long. There's a lot of uncertainty. So in terms of how it'll impact people's decision making, it's hard to know.
I think in the media, we're hearing a lot of reports of certain professions that are considering, moving to Canada as a more open place for them to practice their professions. Is there mobility between local government officials in the US and, like, could you work in a town in Wisconsin and decide you wanted to move up to Manitoba and?
Well, that's what you did.
Yeah, well,
Well, there you go. Okay.
I mean, certainly if
When you have
dual
a
citizenship.
different resume then.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say the challenges for most individuals that would like to relocate from the US to Canada, it will be kind of going through that process to get the ability to work in Canada and to achieve PR. And it's not an easy or quick process. So for most individuals, I think you often hear about this in the media, people that want to come to Canada from the United States, but it's not easily accomplished.
But when you're looking at a labor market like that, wouldn't it behoove the government to make that an easier process?
And obviously that's at higher levels of government.
I'm just asking, we're talking about broader market trends, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's.
Will we get, like, we've had, what decade was it, we had the brain drain, and now maybe this will be the
Yeah, maybe, but we saw what,
brain gain.
we were locally, international students and Canada-wide, that fueled growth. And then, the concern around housing and can't build enough housing for them, government flipped policy significantly on that. So I think that was the core strategy of Canada to spur growth and fill these jobs. We're bringing international immigration here, and when that becomes unpopular on the other side of it, they flip, right? So, wherever they came from, the US or India or wherever, we have the same challenges with housing, right?
Okay.
And so flipping from kind of broader market to our region and to Nelson specifically, I would say our experience has been consistent in the sense that we've seen some turnover and some recruiting challenges. Obviously, there's always going to be some turnover. I think in 2024, there were some job competitions where we really felt the challenge of recruiting. In terms of numbers, we filled 43 external postings last year, and 7 of those were new positions. So that leaves us with probably approximately 35 departures, and that would span a variety of different reasons, from retirements to people leaving on their own accord. In terms of the trends that we saw across the city, there wasn't one particular department that had challenges more than others. It is quite widespread. Certain positions are in very high demand across local government. So For example, in development services, we've seen that with building inspectors in the region. We've seen that with planners as some of the development rules in the province have changed. Certainly with police, we've seen that with constables and with dispatchers. Down at operations, we've seen that with mechanical technicians and engineering techs. So, these things seem to like kind of come in waves where all of a sudden, Castlegar, Nelson, and Roslyn are all looking for a building inspector. So, and then, so we're certainly seeing that competition. We're seeing sometimes we post something and we have a limited number of fully qualified candidates, or the applicant pool isn't quite as strong as we'd like it to be. So in the past, sometimes we've simply delayed hiring for that position and reposted in hopes of, maybe there was an applicant that wasn't quite ready, that was really the perfect fit, and maybe, just giving it a second shot. We've also taken a different approach where we've hired folks that are at a more developmental stage of their career with the commitment to get them that training and that experience to bring them up to where we need them to be fully functioning in that position. So those are kind of the two options, and we've made use of both.
I mean, that used to be, like when I took my parents, when they, back in the 70s, like that used to be the case. You'd get a degree that somebody would hire you, they'd build you up what they needed, and that was your career.
Yeah.
Or a big portion of your career, but it was definitely like, it wasn't just like an organization just waiting for the perfect candidate.
Yeah,
They actually developed.
Yeah, and I could clarify. Sometimes it's, there's a difference between bringing someone on that has all the certifications they need, but not that much experience, versus bringing someone on that doesn't yet have the certification, but committing to work with them to help them get it. Right? So I think we've seen a bit more of the latter. And if you find the right candidate, that can be a great approach. And again, I'll touch on this a little bit later too, but it shows a willingness to invest in our staff and to really commit to them, which I think is very meaningful for a lot of people.
Yeah. And sorry, there's some, we're seeing this with police and fire. We have, just how we hired, well, police is a little different, but certainly fire, we kind of had this hiring of a number of individuals around the same time, and they're all aging out at the same time, and we have this other group that, started recently, so we're missing that experience factor, and I think you heard the mayor talk about that with police as well, so we can, in fire, we've traditionally brought people up through the paid on call. They came in as junior people, but there were enough senior people to mentor and be, that person at that fire that you need at that fire. You can't have a junior person running complex fires, so we definitely, there's some, just how positions were filled in the past. We're gonna have to fill some of those gaps, and we don't have the luxury in some cases to, to start somebody at the bottom end, because we need somebody at that captain level or senior firefighter level and experience.
Yeah, so to kind of, recap, so we're seeing a challenging labor environment. Staff are, one of the city's greatest assets, and I think we have really amazing staff here that, again, when you look at the portfolio the city has, right, everywhere from linemen down at Nelson Hyder Road to, our folks down making our parks beautiful to, people down in finance, like it's such a wide range of different skill sets that you need. So obviously we want to remain competitive moving forward. So about 2 years ago, we kind of started collecting information from staff. Obviously, they're going to have some really great information for leadership as to how can we continue to make this place a place where people want to apply, they're excited to get hired, and they want to grow their career here. So we're doing more regular exit interviews, which is often a good place for staff to be able to provide information anonymously if they wish. And we're also have done a series of pulse checks, which again are anonymous online surveys that allow people generally to answer an open-ended question and kind of just provide us whatever information they would like to about how they're feeling about their work and their team and the city generally. And so we've gotten a lot of really good information through that. We're actually going through another iteration of pulse checks right now. And so about a year and a half ago when we started looking at this, what were the themes that came out of those pulse checks and exit interviews? Well, certainly an importance of prioritizing mental health and psychological safety. So I think you've probably all heard about that. So, a lot of city staff are very public-facing jobs. This community is very passionate about the decisions that the city makes, and certainly staff hear about that all the time. And it can impact people. And COVID impacted people, and then Canberra in front of City Hall impacted people. So, we've become very attuned to the fact that, staff need a level of support on that mental health side. We saw a high interest in modern work arrangements. So that being, whether it's a remote work arrangement that's, formalized through a policy, or earned day off program, or some type of flexibility. We certainly heard a lot about that a year and a half ago. We heard about a desire for enhanced benefits in general and paramedical specifically. So people wanting more access to their massage therapist, their acupuncturist, that type of thing. We heard as well a desire for more regular feedback from their manager. How are they doing in the job? How can they continue to develop? People really wanting and latching on to that feedback, which they're certainly entitled to. We heard that people appreciate the work culture that we do have, but that there is room for improvement. And finally, it'll be no surprise to anybody that when you ask people what they want and how you could make them happier, they did bring up wages as a motivating factor. So that's the information that we, again, if you had to boil down the over 100 responses that we had, those were the themes that kind of came out. So then how can we take that information and make actual tangible changes that people will feel and appreciate, and that are also within the city's budget? So first and foremost, on that mental health side, last fall we did change our employee and family assistance program. So we'd previously been under a provider that was just a little kind of less technologically sophisticated, I would say. We've moved over now to TELUS Health. It's accessible through an app. It still has that primary function of putting you in touch with an in-person counselor in Nelson if that's what you would like. You can also get immediate access to counseling via the phone for emergencies. And then there's a broader suite of supports that come with that as well. So access to a nutritionist, limited access to an attorney for certain questions that might come up. There's a financial planning component. So it's a bit more of like a one-stop shopping for employee assistance. So we decided to give that a try, and I've heard positive reviews so far. So that came online last fall. Beyond that as well, on the benefits side, essentially every single employee group, unionized and exempt, has seen improvements to their benefits package over the last year, I'd say, as we negotiated all of our collective agreements and also made changes to the exempt benefits package. So again, a direct response to input from staff there, and I think it's been appreciated, and we're carefully monitoring what are the financial impacts, because as council probably knows, our health benefits plan is what is called ASO, so we're only receiving administrative services from our providers, so we need to make sure as well, we need to monitor how that usage is going to go up as we've made those benefits more available. But again, most of that was done through collective bargaining. In terms of that flexible work policy side that I brought up, we did implement two policies about a year ago. I think they went online last February. And so these two policies that I'm going to talk about are specific to our exempt staff group, but it should be noted that the bargaining units have access to this as well, either something they can bargain for or something they already have bargained for. So for example, our electrical workers through IBEW already work a flex day program where they work additional 30 minutes a day to arrive at an additional day off. So just to give you an example that this wasn't just something that we provided for exempt staff. In the QP collective agreement, which covers a large amount of our staff, there is language in there about flex works agreements, and those are generally arrived at by different teams or different departments, and it has been utilized. Finance is a good example. Every year during tax season, they implement something during their busy season, which allows them to essentially make time for time off. Sure. On an exempt side, we made it a pretty formal process, a pretty structured process with a policy to guide how this works, which for these types of programs tends to be a good idea. There's been good uptake, but obviously it's voluntary, so no one is forced to participate. And on the exempt side, the way it works, as you can imagine, is you work an extra 30 minutes a day, and as a result, if you do that over the course of the year, you're earning 13 additional days off. Those days are scheduled in advance, and of course, operational requirements are a priority, so if they need to be rescheduled, that is part of the policy as well. We've had good uptake on that policy. Not everybody is participating, but certainly quite a few staff members are, and we've also received a lot of positive feedback.
So perhaps just to clarify, because saying days off is a bit of a misnomer, and this people are actually working the time, and then they're just working longer days, and then they end up with a day where they, So just to make sure that that's abundantly clear, especially for the people that might be listening online.
Yeah, and we're certainly not the only local government that has implemented this type of program. If you go and look for job postings, this is usually highlighted. I look at what's getting posted on Civic Info, which is where most municipal jobs are posted, and most employers now will advertise these type of programs. So again, this is, I think something that staff really appreciate, that actually, is enhancing their time here, or their work satisfaction, and also allows us to remain competitive. On the hybrid work side, we've implemented a policy that allows certain office staff to work 1 day a week from home, and again, there are parameters around this. If there's a meeting that would be in person in the office you're expected to attend, you have to, make sure you have the adequate equipment to be working from home. So obviously the right internet connection and quiet space, that's considering as well some of the ergonomic things that would ensure that you're not going to be harming yourself and that type of thing. So again, there's been pretty good uptake on that policy, and the staff that utilize it seem to appreciate it. I would say too, in terms of now we've been doing this for a year, I'm not hearing any negative reviews. I think if anything, people are a bit more diligent in how they schedule meetings, or do those kind of catch-up meetings to make sure that if you're in the office a little less, that you're just a little bit more on top of, I need to catch up with my manager or whatever it might be.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm wondering about there seems to be a couple of directions, there's that kind of personal direction, each individual staff member kind of crafts what they need, and then the city tries to facilitate that would work. But then there's this team element, and I'm wondering about how do you build in team building? I don't know if you're gonna talk about that or not. Because a lot of this is very individual choices, right?
Yeah, so I will talk about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so again, those were some areas where I think we were quickly able to directly respond to some input from staff, and I think from what I've heard, that was appreciated. Some additional areas as well. So supporting internal growth. Now this goes back to what we were saying about staff wanting more feedback. So we restructured our performance evaluation policy last summer. We worked with each individual department to make sure they understood the policy, the timelines, the expectations. We revamped the forums, and what we've done is we've created a structure where, yes, you're spending some time reviewing performance over the last period, which is most likely a year, especially for our newer staff, and how are they doing in terms of meeting the requirements of the job. But also the second part of that assessment, of that evaluation, is forward-looking. So that's where we talk about a growth plan for that employee. We talk about what is it that they want to achieve in their career. What type of courses might help them get there. So that's that professional development component. So it's really kind of it's not only backwards looking and saying, oh, you did this right, you didn't do that right. It's more saying, here's how you're doing, where do you want to go, and how can we help you get there. So again, I think we're seeing that especially our staff that are in that developmental phase of their career that might be a little younger, or this is one of their first jobs, they are responding well to that.
Counselor Payne.
Is there a certain amount of percentage designated for professional development courses? Is it individual or department wise or?
Yes, so each department budgets for that. I think the numbers are slightly different based on the department. But for my team, there is an amount for each individual, and then they'll maybe find a course or also recommend a course, and we'll talk about it and make sure it's a good fit. And then, so usually people will go to a course or a conference, whatever that might be.
Yeah, and you talked earlier about bringing in people with less experience in accreditation and then planning, so we would pay for them to go through accreditation courses that might be over a 1 or 2 year period and.
Yes, that has been done.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we'll actually have that employee, depending on the course, depending on the position, depending on how much we need that certification. We have had times where the city does pay for it completely. We've had also times where the city enters into a cost sharing agreement with the employee. Kind of depends on the nature of the degree or the certification.
Okay.
And we will require a certain commitment of
Yep.
how long they'll stay with us, or they are required to.
And I would
Yeah.
imagine certain performance,
So,
Yeah, and on the budget side, we work with each department head to look at their staff, and some, if they have professionals, there's certain professional development requirements, certain number of hours, so they need to go to, X number of courses, but we'll try and figure something out where it's like, hey, maybe you do one in person and one online, so we kind of work with them to try and find something that makes sure they're still developing, but keeps things reasonable.
and there's certain mandatory training which we budget for,
yeah, I remember
that are required.
Dennis talking about that one.
Yeah. And I think finally there's, we bring in, facilitators that are gonna provide leadership or whatever to the group of us, so that's, so there's kind of individual training that you need as an individual, there's team leadership training that we do collectively, and and then there's sort of that mandatory training that's required for a number of positions.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into this next title here, creating a great place to work. And I'll talk a little bit to Councillor Woodward's point about how are we bringing people together to do training as a team. So in 2024, we did do enhanced bullying and harassment training, and I think this is just kind of the baseline level training. We're required through WorkSafe to do an annual refresher for our bullying and harassment policy. But I think there was a desire to do kind of a more robust training and to kind of reset expectations in the workplace. And again, I talked about the diversity of positions that we have in this organization. It's also a diversity of generations and backgrounds and ages. And so with that comes sometimes just different approach to the workplace. And so when we talk about bullying and harassment training, it's really about how do we create an inclusive work environment where people are comfortable coming to work, they want to come to work, and they're able to do their job and they feel supported in doing so. And so again, sometimes it's just about making sure that everybody's on the same page about what that means. And if you're not sure about a comment, you probably shouldn't say it, that type of thing.
Is bystander training including in the bullying and harassment?
Can you expand on bystander
How
piece?
to
How to be proactive?
yeah,
and-
how
yes.
you see something happening with some coworkers and helping people understand a proactive way of assisting that situation.
Absolutely. So that was part of our focus with that enhanced training that we did in 2024. It wasn't just how do I not violate the policy? It was more how am I helping to build the place that we want? So in some ways, if I see something that's not right, how can what steps can I take to make sure that to kind of step in
Because that
and
can be
influence
really
that
challenging
situation?
for
Yes.
people who don't have experience in doing that. They recognize that something's not okay, but they're not sure how to proceed to not inflame the situation or alienate
Yeah.
themselves. So I think that bystander training, which I know it as, is really a critical component of that team
Absolutely,
building.
and one of the things we did was we invited all the union executive to be part of that training, because we wanted to hear, they also hear that from their membership, and they need to, they just have that different relationship with their members or employees, and we needed them to, needed to hear that, what makes it difficult for a member to, basically say, ooh, this other person sort of is really not kind of meeting the expectations here, so how do you do that in a
Positive way.
yeah, and not, there's this feeling that, we're a union where you're supposed to look after each other. Do I go say something to management when one of my colleagues, one of my fellows is not acting in the appropriate way? So we wanted to break that down and have the union input. How do we do this?
Yeah.
It's good to know.
Yeah, and again, it's something that we've recognized we need to stay on top of and be very consistent with. But yeah, it's a big task for a large organization, but it's very important. So that was something we did last year. We'll be continuing with some level of training. We won't do an enhanced kind of module like that every single year, but we will obviously continue to do training on that. And then this renewed focus on staff appreciation.
Sorry, Gabe, just before we leave that, one thing we really talked about was how do we ensure that gets, becomes the culture of our workplace. So it's one thing to do this training and say, okay, we ticked that box. Everybody did this training, they signed off, we met, work safe. What we need to do is actually change culture, and people, naturally feel comfortable calling somebody out, or naturally want to, be in a workplace where you saw one of the things, I want to be in a workplace where I feel safe and I can raise things, and I'm not feel like someone's gonna sort of attack me on that, or I get ostracized, or all those sorts of things. So we're really talking about how do we keep this alive, and that's, when we do meetings, when we do, the normal workplace stuff we do, it has to be part of it. It has to be what we normally talk about. It can't be just, did the training and done, and you don't start to build those values into the organization.
I guess to go off that too, I would say, again, with a large organization, from time to time, there may be someone that doesn't follow the policy, but ensuring that we've done a high level of training also puts us in a better position to address that, right? Because we can say, listen, we've spent time and resources on training you about this, and you still weren't able to satisfy the base requirements. So how are we gonna kind of fix this situation? So there's a lot of good reasons to do the training. Again, more moving on to I think we've seen over the past couple of years, just, again, COVID feels like a long time ago, but coming out of that, finding opportunities to bring staff together for a training is very valuable. But even more so when we're bringing different departments together that may not kind of interact on a regular basis that much. I see it every time we do one of those where, this isn't an HR initiative, but last week we did an EOC tabletop from 9 a.m. to 1 o'clock, right? So it was a pretty sustained exercise in our EOC with our emergency management coordinator, and you just get to work with staff that you're not working with on a regular basis, and it kind of just is something a little different. Or you might meet a staff member that just joined and you hadn't had a chance to introduce yourself. So I can see that people want those opportunities to kind of interact a bit outside of the box, right? And meet new people. And so, for example, for this year, again, we're trying to be responsive to what we're hearing from staff and trying to be nimble as well. So I know that there were a few challenging members of the public over the past little while that had interacted with staff, and that can be really challenging. So, we heard that there was a desire for de-escalation training. Our climate and energy team had done that as a team in the past, but it hadn't been more broadly offered to our frontline workers. So we've got 2 sessions coming up in May, and we put it out to anybody that wanted to sign up, and it filled up pretty fast, right? So that was a good indicator that yes, there's a lot of demand for this. Likewise, we have kind of brought back some first aid training as as WorkSafe has kind of augmented some of their first aid attendant requirements, and those filled up quickly as well, and it allowed some staff members to be off site for a day, doing something different, working with people that they don't normally work with. I attended one of those sessions, and again, with such a large organization, I'm still meeting people that I just don't run into on a daily basis.
I was wondering about, it's a small thing, but I was wondering about, does the city recognize people's like birthdays or if they get married, or that kind of personal touch where, when you get the job, you get a raft of information from each person, and then that would be logged, and then just a card, right? Or
So I think
that kind of stuff.
that's not done so much on a corporate level. There is our message board through Jostle that will if someone's comfortable with their birthday being identified, it will be up there. But I think it's handled more on a team level. So rather than having City Hall reach out to someone, I think each department has their own approach as to how they recognize those things. So
It's small.
yes,
But I do think, I have worked in organizations that recognize those little things, and it does make you feel like
Goes a long
you're part
way.
of something, and you're actually people feel grateful for you to be there, or a little recognized.
That's why we got cake for Councillor Tate last time.
Well, that was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Anyways.
Yeah, as Gabe said, I think each department takes pride in doing those type of things, and up here you'll see that we have a birthday month, so whoever has a birthday that month, we get together with a card and some cupcakes in or whatever, so
It's little, these are little things,
Oh,
but I do think
they
they
make a
actually
big difference.
impact.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How are we doing on time? I don't wanna.
It's 5:15.
Yeah.
And because we have a long way to get to dinner, I was hoping that we'd be done at 5:45. And I was hoping to fit in the city manager's report. He tells me he doesn't have a big in-camera or open report, but councillor report, so
Okay.
how are you doing for slides?
5 to 6 more minutes.
Okay, well, that sounds pretty good,
Okay,
keep
just wanted to
going,
make sure,
yeah.
cause I saw, that new clock is.
The new clock. Yeah, I'm getting a sunburn. I put extra sunscreen on this side of my neck on Tuesday nights before I come.
So the last thing I touch on here is leadership training. So as a management team, last year we tried to reinitiate some of the trainings that we've done as a management team. So last June, we did a 2-day workshop with a facilitator from Selkirk. We followed that up in the fall with a half-day session, and at that session, we invited union leadership. We're continuing that this June as well. And again, it's about bringing that team together, developing our leaders, making sure that, coming together as a team to talk about what challenges you might be experiencing, and then having a facilitator there that can also help us drill down on core principles using a common language that we can all understand and relate to. I think was something that went really well last year, and again, there was a good buzz and a good excitement about that. And it's always hard to schedule it because no one has time to do that, but it's one of those things where I think it pays dividends to do it. So those are things that we've all done and we're continuing to work on. Right now, a couple of things that we're working on as an HR team. So again, in that idea of developing our future leaders, the city has provided, I think, a lot of really great internal progression for candidates. So we see a lot of our managers, supervisors, some of our department heads have gone through the ranks and been able to achieve those positions with the city because they were, they showed that they had some kind of leadership characteristics, and also because they were really good at the technical components of their job. But I think there's been a recognition that we probably need to equip them, with a bit more support as to what are the expectations of a manager. So the HR for Managers Guide is an effort to put a lot of information in one place, and some of it is that technical. What is the recruitment process? What's your role in that process? How is that going to go down? But then a lot of it too is about team building, communication, and how do you handle conflict? And of course, those things need to be developed, and there's no guide or manual that can answer them for you. But I think it provides some comfort to a new manager to be able to at least point them in the direction of a place where they can find some information. they can read through that and they can come chat with their HR support to kind of come up with a solution. So that's something that we've rolled out about 6 weeks ago, and we want to workshop as well with our management team after they've been able to review it. And that was something that we heard people wanting, like a bit more kind of a document that they could rely on. We're also working on a succession planning report. The intent of that is a document with regards to the city's leadership, where certain things are at, where we're identifying gaps for the future. That's a document that I believe we would be sharing with council when it's completed. And I think it would help us further tailor our recruiting and retention efforts. So, is there a particular department where there's really, a lack of kind of, where's that institutional knowledge gonna go to? Do we have 2 or 3 or 4 people from the same team that are nearing retirement age or have indicated that they don't see themselves staying here for long? So I think coming up with a bit of a report will help us kind of understand where we're at in terms of that succession planning. So we are actively working on that. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on being transparent with regard to our limitations. So this is the compensation side of things. I think it's really important to be clear and direct with staff from the get-go as to how compensation works within an organization, because otherwise they may have some expectations or ideas that just simply don't materialize, and then it leaves them frustrated. So we have a compensation policy. It's a council-approved policy. You may have seen it in the past, you may not have. Obviously, council could choose to make changes, but right now our policy is to pay the median rate as established through a survey with comparable municipalities. That survey is done every 3 years. We did it about 1.5 years ago. We used an external consultant. So we'll be doing that again in 1.5 years. And that's how salaries for each position are established. And our goal is to pay the median rate. Now, there are times where we talked about bringing candidates in under a developmental rate. So that might be where we bring someone in at 90% of the median with a commitment to bring them to the median based on performance evaluations. It's something we've done. And usually we tell a candidate within 1 year we'll have you at the median. And again, assuming the performance is there, we've always, followed through on that commitment.
And that comes with the growth plan. How do you get there?
Occasionally, not very often, but when we identify a candidate that could, bring the organization to another level with regards to the work that they're doing as a recruiting tool, we might engage in a negotiation, and we might go to 105% or 110% to bring that that individual into the organization. So that does happen from time to time, not that often. I think where there's been some confusion in the past is that when someone is at the median, they say, okay, well, what is next for me? When am I going to go to 105 or 110? And the answer has been, well, no, our pay policy is to pay the median, and that's just reestablished every 3 years based on your counterparts of different municipalities and what they're paying. If you would like to apply for a different position that becomes open with additional, that's one way to kind of advance your career here at the City of Nelson, is to apply for positions, that if people can feel, I think, a bit constrained with that, because it'd be like, oh, my manager is not retiring anytime soon, so how am I going to advance my career? So again, it's been something that we've talked about. Moving to a performance-based system comes with a lot of challenges. It's not commonly done in local governments, and I think for good reason. And so we've defended the policy that we currently have. We think we're paying, this, I think my last slide, we think we're paying very competitive wages, and we're providing great benefits. And again, this is more on the kind of exempt side of things. Obviously, if you're a member of a union, your wages are negotiated through collective bargaining, and if council, paid attention to the last round of bargaining, some of these unions, were in very strong positions and were able to negotiate what I think were really good wage increases for their members. But I think overall we're paying competitive wages, again, as compared to our counterparts. And we're also providing great benefits. And I think some of the changes that we talked about earlier are pushing the needle on that as well, right? So when people go to a conference and talk about working in the City of Nelson, I think there are a lot of really great perks about working here and living here, obviously.
I did notice the improvements in the benefit package, definitely made it more competitive. I didn't notice, is there an RSP contribution type benefit at the city? No.
Municipal pension.
So it's not a 401k or a,
Sorry, you have the what pension?
they have a
municipal
pension
pension.
plan, they have the municipal pension plan.
Defined
They have a defined benefit pension
All
plan.
employees
All
in the
employees
city.
have a
Okay,
defined
that's,
benefit
I
plan.
wasn't sure if the.
No 401ks, no,
No, I don't.
yeah, no DCs,
No,
Yeah. no
No,
targeted
pensions.
plans.
pension plan that you get as a municipal employee.
Yeah, I didn't know if non-unionized employees
Oh,
or
yeah.
exempt employees or.
Yeah, and that's a requirement.
Perfect,
All,
thank you.
all
So
employees over a certain thing have to be on the municipal pension plan.
Gabe, when you were explaining the thing about the excluded and the median rate, and just to listen to that, and then, that people may say, when do I move to 105%? I think what's important, I mean, you said that gets reviewed every 3 years. I don't want anybody thinking that's listened that you only get a wage increase every 3 years. I mean,
Right.
excluded,
Yes.
we review that so that the base, so then if you're at the median and that's who you are, you're Miss Median, every 3 years, yes, that median rate that I get might increase some, but I'm getting a wage increase
That's correct, you're getting
every year. It's that,
cost
it's
of
not,
living.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a
so you're
cost
getting
of
the
living
cost of living calculation every 3 years. So it's not like, it's just that people might have seen that and they're interpreting like, oh, so only every 3 years you get a raise or some more money, but the unions are getting their whatever.
That's correct, that's not the case.
Yeah.
Exempt staff do receive, subject to council approval, annually a cost of living adjustment that is an average of the BC Consumer Price Index over the last 12 months and the
union.
QP increase. So that I think is a very
I just want to
fair-
make sure that people understood that you don't just wait for 3 years waiting for some miracle to happen to your pay. You are getting yearly
Correct.
pay increases
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, and so my last comments are again, I think we're in a good place on that
And
compensation
just
side.
before we leave the
Sure.
compensation, again, just, that, that word median, has been unfortunately by some viewed as, you just, I perform at a high level and you pay me like just an average employee, and that's, that's been unfortunate, and the council, we do the council's compensation is based on the same group of municipalities. We look at, our population, we look at what our, budget is, our capital plan, we look at the number of employees we have, we factor all that in. So Nelson, as council knows, is a much more complex and sophisticated municipality than a city of 11,000 people. We have our own electric utility, we have our own police, we have our own professional fire, we run our own transit. So when we compare, we're not, generally those municipalities that we compare to are larger, but they have the same number of employees, they have the same budgets we have. So that's what we're comparing to. So when we say, we're actually, as a City of Nelson employee, you are being compensated as an employee of a larger, more sophisticated municipality than sort of your ones that just do typical roads and sidewalks and that sort of thing. So that is taken into account, and that level of sophistication you need to be here is factored in.
Sorry, I think with a median word too, like that's a tricky word that we use in this case. A lot of other organizations will have steps, and so that's kind of when Gabe refers to people saying, okay, well, when do I get to move up a step, right? Like let's imagine that we had 5 steps in a grid system. So you're grid 13 and there's 5 steps there. You would start typically at a step 1 or step 2, and then you would work your way up to step 5. Year over year, you move up, and then once you get to step 5, you're just getting that cost of living adjustment. Well, that step 5 is the median rate.
Yeah.
So at the city here, we're paying that step 5 right off the top. unless you come in and you're, just learning like Gabe said, then you get that adjustment that's a bit lower, and then you move up that, essentially one step to hit that step 5 after a year of employment. So it's not as though we're not, we're compensating people different, less than others because it's the median rate. We're actually just paying people for the full worth what we think that job is, as opposed to saying, well, you're new to the organization, so we're gonna start you at a step 2, and then you have to wait 4 years to get all the way up to a step 5, right? And the whole time it's like, well, I'm doing the job for this, it's not, performance based, it's just time in. We pay the median rate, that would be that step 5 rate.
And our union contracts reflect the same thing where we have a step. On the police side, if you're fully qualified as a first class constable, it's not that you don't start as a fourth class constable. You get paid that first class constable rate. So we're basically modeling the same thing for the city. It's that development range that we use as for those that aren't fully qualified at that level.
And I was just gonna finish by saying, inevitably we'll lose some high performers from time to time that they wanna move to a bigger city to increase their earning potential, they wanna jump to the private sector, that type of thing. This is again pretty typical for local governments. We're not a big bank that pays bonuses at the end of the year based on how many hours you build. So again, I think it's just about making sure that people understand what the playing field is, what the policy is. And I think we're getting better in terms of communicating that out at the beginning of someone's tenure here. So again, being sensitive to your timing for tonight, that is the presentation. I think we're in a pretty good position in a challenging landscape.
Councillor Payne has a question.
I think part of that challenging landscape is still housing, is it? What are the comments that you're hearing when you're housing?
Absolutely, and it's I think there is that candidate once in a while that is a very qualified candidate, and when they start looking a bit more carefully at relocating here, we've had people withdraw, and housing has been cited. I wouldn't say it's super common, but yes, maybe last year maybe I heard that 3 or 4 times.
Do you ever look at relocation bonuses or anything like that?
We do actually.
Yeah, we'll pay reasonable moving
Yeah.
costs here for sure.
Yeah, we've applied that recently to a number of employees that were moving here from
And just
somewhere
one
else.
more follow-up, have you seen other communities doing anything, really creative and innovative? Like I know, I don't know if it was a couple of weeks ago when the Railtown building was here, they were talking about doing a trade with the city of Nelson to have one of those units that possibly someone could use as a landing spot. Are other communities doing something like that we need to look at?
We've started having those conversations, and we were identifying kind of the pros and cons. It'd be nice to have a landing spot for people that are moving here. We're a big organization, but I don't know if it would always be occupied. It could go months unoccupied, in which case then we're taking another unit of housing off the market for the broader community, and also it would come at a cost to the city. So we've started talking about that as a potential.
And I just have one more follow-up, is that okay? Because I think the other challenge is childcare.
Yes.
So any creative things happening out in the world around childcare?
I would say some of the things that we've put into place certainly are pushing the needle on that, right? So allowing people, like that EDO program allows people to structure their lives in a way where they can be home more. Same with the remote work policy for those positions that are, where it makes sense. Beyond that, I think, I think that's a good suggestion as to something that we should be looking more at, because it's not something I've really dove into.
I mean, I know the childcare center up at Silver King, if you're a Selkirk employee or student, that's ended?
Certainly a lot of
That's the way it used to be
families,
when my daughter was
yeah.
working there, so maybe that's a change then.
Certainly a lot of
You had
families-
priority on the waiting list.
I know a lot of staff that have children do utilize our youth center programs. Obviously, those are open to anybody, they're not just for city staff. But it probably is a nice, I think they usually know right away when the registration's open for.
Yeah. Okay, just, trying to
Alright.
keep an eye on that.
I'd say that the other item that can be challenging is the spouse.
Is the what, sorry?
Is the spouse
Partner.
finding employment,
Yeah,
right? Or the partner.
I was just wondering about like, would we ever offer, a pass to Whitewater or, a pass to the golf course or like,
Well,
Those are available to.
we do that through payroll deductions, so we pay that up front, which is a popular program that we have. We pay up front for EV
sure.
e-bike, so we have some good programs around that, but I think we're quite progressive on that.
Just kind of bonuses that that would highlight our local region.
Yeah, it gets hard when we sort of start to get into direct,
Sure.
Where does that stop and not stop? So we have lots of unionized employees. Is it only for exempt? Is it only for certain
Fair
people? Is it, right?
Thank you.
I like our program where, we can make it easy for you. If you wanna ski,
Right.
we pay it up front and,
You pay it off
yeah.
during your.
Yeah, comes off
Okay.
bi-weekly and it's not a big impact on you, so.
Thank
Those are unique perquisites, like I've got a lot of friends in local government and that ability to, whether it's buying your bike or your ski passes every year, we do golf passes too. To have that and then it just comes off in a small trickle off your paycheck, I mean, that's a pretty unique and pretty accessible perk, right? So yeah, it's being creative like that, and I think to be honest, that's like Nelson's entrepreneurial spirit that also makes us that much more complex than most cities, right? But it's just doing things like that, like, oh yeah, we can do that, why wouldn't we, right? So,
Thank you. Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Well, thank you very much for that update on human resources. I mean, it's a good amount of work that you're doing there, and yeah, keep on doing it. You've got a good team there, and
Yeah, no, I should say that I have a really good team that makes everything kind of function really well, so.
Well, I think, just speaking of that, one of the things that was done is to embed one of the HR generalists with departments so that they really get to know those people. In the past, they kind of served everyone, so I think that's been super successful.
Yeah, you guys probably don't see like Lindsay, Jordan, and Kendra very much, but if you do see them, like say hi. They're really great. So
Thank you.
great. Thank you. Okay,
yeah, you too. Thanks for your time.
thank you, Gabe. Okay, moving on to item 7. So, Kevin, did you have any?
Yeah, no, I think I can pass.
I'm gonna go over then to General Manager Johnson.
Sure, yeah, just a couple quick things to update on around town. First off, there has been a number of emails received about the Nelson Rowing Club and the lease that they have off of us and their sublease to the Nelson Paddling Club. Just to let you know, that is something that we did discuss with the Paddling Club. So quick history is Nelson Rowing Club built the club there. They turned it over to the city, or the house that, the club, I guess, where the rowing club is. Sorry?
The building.
Yeah, the rowing club, the building. They built the building and turned it over to the city. The city leases it to them. That was in the early 2000s. They decided to sublease a portion of it to the paddling club. While they weren't as big to use it all. I guess the intent was always that the rowing club would eventually get big enough to use that space, and the paddling club would then have to find somewhere else at that time. Through all of this has just been, the city has been hands-off because we lease the whole building to the rowing club, and then the rowing club subsequently subleases to the paddling club. So in last August, the rowing club let the paddling club know that they would not be renewing their sublease for the space. And through sort of communications back and forth throughout, starting then, and then it was kind of quiet for a while. I sent you all an email with some facts on what happened and the time difference between, but I think brass tacks is recently we had a conversation with both parties, both the rowing club and the paddling club, just to better understand the situation. And ultimately the direction that the city provided, as a lot of people are sort of looking to the city to resolve this problem. The first step that the city said, to the paddling club was, well, have you even talked to the rowing club since you received the email to say they wouldn't be renewing the lease? And they said, no, we have not. And so this was a few weeks ago. and they received that, last August. So, there wasn't a whole lot of effort made by the paddling club to try and resolve this issue with the rowing club, and they were really looking to the city to just solve everything. So we encouraged them to try and work it out together. Obviously, we don't have a lot of extra room down around lakeside or waterfront access for anything like this. So we've really left it in their hands to discuss with their peers in the building, the people that they have leased off of for the last number of years, to try and work something out. And frankly, they should have been doing that since the day they got the notification last August, to try and work that stuff out and have a plan whereby they could be a little bit less panicked now that they're coming up into, finally talking to us and saying, well, we have to be out of there in 3 weeks. So just to say that, that is in their hands right now to work out, and I imagine there will be continued, notifications or messages coming into council about that. And at this time, while we are trying to think of other areas where it could possibly go, the city doesn't have a lot of assets down there, and green space is a premium. One of the things that we've really identified with the addition of the basketball court and the larger bocce courts, that we're really starting to lose a lot of sort of free green space, and we are really prioritizing that free green space. So we're not looking to have another building built in that green space. We want that to be available for everyone to do anything in, right? So that's kind of where we're sitting in that discussion right now. Councillor Panisi.
Can you just tell me, so they need a building, and have they specified what size building they need?
That was one of the things that we also sent them away from the meeting, and sorry, I looked to Sonia with this because she was also there, but to let us know what are the critical number of boats that you need to do
Like
this.
if we had some criteria of what they were looking for and put it out in the public space, there might be some other thoughts and suggestions of how that could work.
And we encourage them to do that as well.
I understand.
But one of the challenges is they don't actually have any programming set up. So they've had sort of ebbs and flows over the years. Some years they've been really organized and had a lot of programming for the public available, lessons and stuff. They currently don't have any of that built out right now, so I don't think that they're entirely clear on what they need.
And we have invited them to make a delegation to council, so
Okay.
I'm just waiting to
Great.
hear whether
That would be helpful,
take
thank you.
advantage of that.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Jade?
How far does the lakeside property go? Does it go on the other side of under the bridge? There, like how much is actual park space, and where does that?
It's actually,
That would be highways right away.
That's not us,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
and then it goes into the RCMP.
CMP.
Yeah, and it's actually
They
interesting.
got a ton of beach.
It's actually interesting, and that's an area that, was highlighted, that, you can talk to MOTI, you can talk to them,
Okay.
We also really encouraged them to say, look, there's a lot of shoreline along here. They said, maybe even just a sea can would work, and, so we encouraged them to talk to the regional district. Because the regional district has plenty of water access along, up and down the west arm that they could look at, and they said, yeah, that's a great idea, we hadn't considered that. So there's options there where you can look at that, so. Sorry, Councillor Page and Pinheiro both had questions there.
I'm drawing mine.
Yeah, you framed it out a lot larger than I was thinking, but it was also around the pier and around where else along the water line. Like, we have a park master plan coming down the chute, but do we really contemplate what our water, recreation plan looks like for that area, right? We've got a bunch of different groups, it's pretty ad hoc. And we're running into this situation where, is this part of a long-term strategy to make sure that this kind of program is being delivered, or as we are holding it now, we're just, if you can lease it, great, if you can run programming, great, but we don't see it as part of a larger strategy. But if it's something that can come to parks or come to recreation to talk about, for the West Arm itself, or in another location that spreads it out a little bit more, so we're utilizing other spaces.
And I think you're bang on, right? Like, this is a piece of recreation, that's a S226 task, to look at what are the recreational opportunities. Council through this, through council, there's some work done there as well.
Right there.
Sorry?
The paddling center's right there, and my understanding is it used to be partially in the paddling center.
You mean the bathhouse?
Yeah,
The paddle shack? Yep.
Well, the NDCC run
Yeah, there's a history there, and you know, there was some discussion about that, but when they moved into the rowing club, they left that up for the NDCC to run that recreational aspect out of there. But yeah, so there's still some options. We've encouraged them, like I said, to come to, as a delegation, we've encouraged them to talk to the regional district to see what options are there. So, and most importantly, encourage them to talk actually to the rowing club to about, you know, this lease not being renewed.
Yeah, I think
That's
there's some
probably where to
leadership
start,
changes
so.
going on.
Yeah. So that's that quick update, being mindful of time. Just a quick update on the transit exchange. Hopefully by the end of May, the bulk of that will be done. There's some parts that we're gonna be waiting on a little bit longer, the shelters and the streetlights. So the anticipation is that road will be opened up and accessible, and the transit exchange will be working by end of May. The fields, there's also been some noise about the fields. Typically they are there's that April 15th opening for the fields. This year they were incredibly saturated, lakeside playing fields, which meant that we couldn't get the machinery on to them to do the work that we need to do in anticipation of the season to ensure that those fields stay nice throughout the season. So, you know, I know that I've received a couple of emails of people being upset that they aren't available today, because I believe today's the 15th. But we are working to get those open this week. But just so everybody knows, the priority is that we maintain those fields as beautiful fields and not let them get run down. I grew up playing on those fields, and I can tell you, we never wanna get back there. Because it was giant dirt patches in front of the goalies. You could not, it was very difficult to make good contact on a ball that was bouncing all over everywhere. So we really do prioritize the care of those beautiful facilities that we have. And so we apologize for the later than anticipated start, but that's a nature thing. It was too saturated to do our work.
Chris?
Can I jump back to the transit exchange? Sorry.
Yes.
So the work will be completed by the end of May. Is there a prospective move time?
We have a meeting coming up this week.
Okay.
Yeah, so when,
Oh, so the transit meeting's coming up this week.
well, we just have our project update meeting.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so when we do that.
Okay, so then we'll have a prospective date for people to get ready, because one of the things I'm sure everyone saw an email about is that there's no schedules up at the bus shelter, like at Warden Baker, they took the schedules down. Is that us that does that?
Yes.
Yeah, like I normally look on my app, but not everybody does, so you get to the Warden Baker and
Yeah.
it used to be there. It's not there, and
Well,
it
we can
hasn't
get
been
that
there
out
for
no matter what,
weeks.
yeah. Yeah.
I think people might have felt that meant there was an imminent shift, but it doesn't look like
No.
it. So I would appreciate it, being
Yeah.
back up.
And Chris, maybe just give a quick update where we are with the Kootenai Street water project.
Yeah, Kootenai Street water main, we still probably have a couple more weeks there. The main is done, it's installed, we're now doing the connections. We are hustling, I think they just should have demobed yesterday or today out of in front of Relish there. The anticipation of Relish wanting to get their patio in. So yeah, we probably a couple more weeks there to finish that up with the connections.
And will that include paving or?
It should, yeah, I don't know. The paving for the smaller patch paving comes, like, the way that we actually go to market for that is one of the ways we secure good pricing is to say, well, come in and do it sort of like a whole bunch of patches all at once, as opposed to us having them come in for small patches here and there. So I would have to confirm when we're planning on bringing the paving in, but you know, it could be a bit of a wait. So. And then, yeah, just kudos to the crews. I just wanna say, to get downtown, we talked about it earlier, looking so great, ready for patios to start being built, I believe as of today or tomorrow. Point being is that we will always maintain that May 1st will be our target, because this is simply a seasonal thing. So much like the the playing fields, they were too saturated to do the work. Sometimes if we're still plowing snow up on, the high parts of Nelson in, late March, early April, we aren't gonna have the resources to be able to start doing all the cleanup downtown. So it's been a good year. Thank you to the crews for hustling and getting out there and doing it so that the patios can get open for what seems like a beautiful extended weekend here, so. And I think I will leave it at that for today.
Thank you.
Councillor Payne has another question.
We had talked about, well, it's some time ago, about the driver training, to reduce
Smart driver, yeah.
greenhouse gas emissions. I haven't noticed, is it happening?
It's being piloted in Nelson Hydro and it should be, I don't know the exact date that it's rolling out, but it's coming up here shortly.
Perfect, so that'll be hydro, transit, works.
It's being piloted in Hydro to start to see how effective it is, and then once it's rolls out, it will, go to, if it rolls out, if it's deemed successful, then it would go out to everybody.
So when will we know that it's been, the pilot is a 3-month project?
Yeah, I'd have to have a look in
Yeah,
that,
we can give you that information.
I'm just interested, because I think it's about a year ago, well, not quite a year ago, that we heard that report from Graham from the climate team about how effective that would be, so I'm
Yeah,
hoping that
yeah.
the results will demonstrate that.
Yeah. And that was a year ago, he came forward saying, for 2025 budget, we will be talking about these things, right?
Well, I think he came in with Jody and just talked about when they did their analysis
Yeah.
of all of those
They
things.
set us up
that
for
would be one of
2025,
the-
yeah.
One of the projects
It
that,
wasn't so much a budget conversation as it
No,
was
it
just sort
wasn't
of like,
budget.
here's some things that we could do.
yeah, to meet our goals, our Nelson Next goals. That
Mhm.
was one of a big hit that would be relatively inexpensive. I guess that's the relation to the budget to do.
Yeah, I think when we brought that back, there was, how fast we convert our fleet. This was part of that strategy, is it buys us more time if we can, do some reductions by driver training as
behavior.
opposed to, accelerating the fleet
Yeah,
replacement.
and just, I mean,
Yeah.
still idling. I mean, certain vehicles
Yeah.
are now being built with the automatic
Yeah.
shut off. You can't idle. It's not an option anymore and certainly Europe.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's part of our policy on that as well, looking at that, or, those anti-idling vehicles. I'm not sure if they all do it now, or.
I thought it was a federal regulation.
Okay.
Another question, Councillor Payne, for, I believe, the city manager.
I do, but that's sort of back to the city manager. So last week when we were talking about the Rail Town Society and them doing the improvements to move down the street, you mentioned that there was gonna be an acquisition of a piece of property. So my understanding was that the policy for disposal of property was gonna be something on the work plan for development services this year. Is that the same around acquisitions? Does that go through
No, this
council
is-
or?
This is a road allowance, right? So,
So that doesn't come to council when a piece of property comes into the cities?
yeah, that's,
And is
Any-
disposition of that type of property the same?
if we're gonna dispose of a road allowance, that comes to
Disposal,
council.
sorry, disposal.
Yeah.
Disposal, yeah.
So any subdivision, they have to satisfy us, under your subdivision bylaw that, that they have road access. So this is strictly driven
Okay.
by the fact that
Yeah,
they.
I just wondered when it triggered an event that it needed to come before council to
No,
dispose of
no,
a piece of
this
property.
is, the approving officer has that's part of their
Got it, thank you.
requirement, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to put off the council reports until the start of after dinner, so if I could have a motion to recess for dinner. Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Panera. If I could have a motion, councillors, to reconvene. Moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor, and that carries. Councillor, I did say before the break that we would do city reports from council right when we open, but I completely forgot that we have Alex Toom, one of our planners, calling in from Montreal. So we will do our council reports at the after we hear the official community plan update. So I hope that's okay with everyone. So moving right into the agenda, there is we have item number 10. And so as usual, we have a cultural presentation during the Committee of the Whole. So National Poetry Month was established in Canada in 1998 by the League of Canadian Poets. National Poetry Month takes place every April and brings together schools, publishers, booksellers, literary organizations, libraries, communities, and poets from across the country to celebrate poetry and its vital place in Canadian culture. Cheryl Cook is going to be providing a cultural presentation by reading a poem to council. I would like to, at this point, introduce Joy Barrett, our Cultural Development Officer, who will introduce Cheryl in more detail. Welcome, Joy, and welcome, Cheryl.
Yeah, sure.
Cheryl's gonna stand there.
I'm gonna stand there. I'll sit here while you introduce me though.
And Cheryl's gonna read 2 poems. Cheryl Cook is an off-grid, Kootenai-based writer, herbalist, community collaborator, and mother of 3 teenagers. She is currently working on a novel with funding from the Canada Council of the Arts and Columbia Kootenai Cultural Alliance Major Projects grants, as well as a full-length book of poetry with funding from the Canada Council of the Arts. She has won silver in the past Kootenai literary competition. Cheryl is sought after for her spoken word performances throughout the West Kootenays and Southern Interior, and has recently become the regular host of the Nelson Poetry Slam. When she isn't co-creating community arts events or writing, you can find her in her gardens. Welcome, Cheryl.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm always happy when politicians want to hear poetry. I grew up on the res. And it just makes sense that Marilyn James is angry. If she ever wants to see her grandkids not extinct, she has to stay mad. What does it mean to you when I say matriarch? I'm kidding. I grew up white on the Teach Ridge, which is on the reserve, but not really the res. Some halfway liminal space, some little strip of houses across from wild strawberries and paradise until it turns into forests and bears where I got to live next door to your kokum. Feeding me her bannock and jam, my mother picked berries, she grew mushrooms in the basement and poked curved needles edged with razors through deer hide, one side fine, sharp, bleeding. Seed beads pouring out over the table, a meditation, a mesmerization, small treasure. These fine glass fish eggs, a universe, a beginning. The lake is the deepest thing I have ever seen. And over again, I am leaning over the side of the boat, watching water drop, dripping off my trolling line. Our freezer full of fish for the winter. The lake is my mother too. Your kokum teaches my mother to make moccasins, feed me bannock. Grandbabies swing in hammocks in her kitchen. But that is a different story about a matriarch. Marilyn James says, take it to the water. How many hours does it take for an ego to dissolve? I am grateful I spent my childhood watching the current go by. Soft swirls curling, breaking tension. I am still and thriving. Sometimes I lay in the cold, damp earth and cry myself to sleep, wake up held in a dirt cradle, chilled, alive. I pull the weeds. I lay in the knapweed, ego imploding, ego death, sober tripping hard. What is the obligation that comes with privilege? What is the obligation that comes with privilege of access? Can you drive to the backcountry? Have all-wheel drive, hiking boots, gas in your car? These unceded secret spots sustain us, cradle our homes. What is the responsibility of capacity? Do you have the capacity for reciprocity? How do we cultivate reciprocity? Marilyn James says, take it to the water. I sit with the idea of giving up my anger and I'm left angry at myself, rage-filled, incomprehensible. Some rage is a tool, sharp edge honed for change, cultivating space for softness. The earth beats through my body when I lay down in the cool moss, down in the wild ginger. Small trees with 2 or 3 leaves, little brown mushrooms pop into view. This is where I am supposed to be. I take my anger to the water, hot and raging. Cool green blue carries me. Sun catching glass ripples, slow fall, water spiraling. Healing happens in spirals. I wash my hands and face, speak out loud into the low golden light, water lapping at my arms, embraced. This is where I am supposed to be. A layer of my anger washes down the stream. This land holds me. I am home. Marilyn James says, take it to the water.
Before you do your next poem, can you just ever so much move, there we go. You keep going out of the
Drifting
view
out
of
of
our
the frame.
camera. I do wanna keep you for posterity, so
Okay, I'll stand a
Thank
little
you.
tighter. The poem I wrote you last week wasn't sad enough. What can I say? So much isn't being said. There are no words. Or the words are swelling in my throat. Everything I say is lined in what is left unsaid. I struggle to find my conscious breath as I move from right action to right action. It will never be enough because it isn't enough. These are moments that cannot be unseen. These are moments that cannot be undone. What have I not done? What have I not said? What if I flip over the rocks of my unconscious? Some small black-backed beetles scuttling, pill bugs curling, spiders retreating. Even then, when I call in the light quickly like a spell or a curse, it is hard to see my flaws. They sneak away so quickly back into the darkness. The darkness of humanity is so hard to hold, examine. Could it be that it is like this for all of us? Our badness always slipping just out of sight? How do we get to the point where we are willing to extinct each other? How fragile we are, how easy to steer, how difficult it is to stay in my conscious breath, how difficult it is to stay in right action. The vile taste of humanity lays under my tongue until the words start to creep out like small terrors, enemies. What I am left holding back is my own bitter wrongs, my small crimes of cruelty, trying to understand how we rise again and rise again. Which neighbors am I willing to hold the line for? What am I willing to give up? Which times do I crawl into my nest of a bed to soften until I can try again? The poem that I wrote you last week wasn't urgent enough. Babies starving, snipers waiting, the glass eyes of hungry children protruding through my dreams, waking me. It is so fragile being a mother. My obsessive love tracking my children, some worry stone in their pocket. Take snacks, I say. Have you had water today? Brush your teeth, let me make you tea, eat protein, fat, vegetables. What have you eaten? Don't fall into the swamp. The water will be hiding under the snow. Be careful that you don't get too cold or wet on your walk. These are near men, nearly grown. I can walk away, move away from them in this world, and can affirm my little mantra that they are fine. They are fine. Even if they fall in the swamp under the snow, they will be finally fine. And generally, this is true. I grow and shatter the crust of myself, older this week, larger. For how many breaths breaths can I hold the starving babies, feel the panic in my guts, lean into what their parents might be feeling. Tonight, I'm going dancing. I have held enough. Even the knowledge of this precious luxury of detachment left at home. The poem I wrote you last week wasn't dark enough. That was before the self-immolation of the soldier. That was before the flower massacre. After the bombs, they drop food. The only words that come are sinister. Listen, I know this has been happening, the starvation, the cruelty, but the bubble is breaking and the world is getting smaller. And every breath we take in unison, every time we microdose one another's pain, we are rising together towards something more hopeful, and I will keep softening towards revolution. My teenage son asks me about humility, not the kind that brings humiliation, but the kind that brings humanity. In school, they are learning about wars, not historical, but real time, yesterday, tomorrow. How poorly the grown-ups are doing at serving the children. The first lesson is breathing. Inhale into the space you feel safe. Exhale into right action. Ground into your heavy truths. Every conscious breath is resistance, revolution. Child, keep breathing. Thank you all for having me.
So much. Thank you so much, Cheryl. That was wonderful. Okay, we're gonna practice that deep breath. That was some excellent poetry. It's a great message. Okay. Moving on to item number 11 is public participation, and I know that we have at least one member in the audience that will be joining us for public participation, so I will read out the statement about public participation. City Council welcomes comments from the public on issues it is dealing with or other issues of interest to the public. Before speaking, please state your name and area of residence, city or RDCK. Comments from the public will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. This is not the forum for complaints, which are dealt with by staff through the established complaint procedure. Council will not make any decisions at this meeting about the matter you raise, but may refer the matter to staff for follow-up. Speakers must not address topics that relate to matters for which a public hearing must be held prior to council's consideration of a matter or adoption of a bylaw. Speakers shall address all comments through the mayor or presiding chair. Please avoid clapping or displaying any emotional response, as such actions will not be permitted. Maintaining a composed demeanor ensures that all opinions shared can be heard in a setting that is as unbiased as possible. So Jason, I believe you're gonna speak, so come on up.
Thank you for the opportunity, members of council. My name is Jason Rusu. I'm a resident of Nelson. I'm also a current member of the Nelson Paddling Club. I served on the Nelson Paddling Club board for a period of 4 years. I'm a nationally accredited canoe and kayak coach and former athlete of canoe and kayak racing. I have been asked here on behalf of the Nelson Paddling Club board and our current president, Dia Curry, to represent our board and the membership, many of whom are seated behind me tonight. We are here this evening because the Nelson Paddling Club has been advised of an order from the City of Nelson dated March 17th in the form of a letter to vacate the center boat bay of the Nelson Rowing Club Boathouse by the 30th of this month. Currently, the Nelson Paddling Club does not have access to an adequate venue to move our fleet of boats and equipment. Eviction in less than 2 months puts our equipment in jeopardy of loss or damage. We don't even have enough time to liquidate our equipment if that was an option. Our ability to continue to offer youth and adult programming will be severely undermined by the order to vacate in such a short period. A little bit of background on our club. We were formerly known and founded as the Nelson Kayak and Canoe Club, established in 1992. And the Nelson Kayak and Canoe Club was a contributing partner both in funds and volunteer labor in the construction of the current Nelson Rowing Club building. The Nelson Kayak and Canoe Club provided the framework and equipment fleet for the summer paddle sport programs and rentals now run by the Nelson District and Community Center. Since 2014, the Nelson Paddling Club has hosted community events and programming such as Summer Learn to Kayak and Canoe Day Camps, Youth Intro to Flatwater Racing, Canoe and Kayak, Youth Competitive Training and Racing Programs, Adult Learn to Paddle and Paddle Skill Development. Nelson Paddling Club is the only club in the East and West Kootenay Canoe Club, and our regional representation ensures paddling representation at the BC Summer Games. Without that, that representation would go away. We promote an accessible water sport to all ages and abilities with a low financial barrier to entry. Our club provides all equipment and charges, and we charge reasonable programming fees. The Nelson Paddling Club has been a responsible and cooperative paying tenant of the Nelson Rowing Club over the last 11 years. Finally, at this time, we are appealing to the City of Nelson for its leadership to assume a role of mediator between ourselves and Nelson Rowing Club to arrive at a mutually beneficial agreement on a timeline for the orderly removal and safe relocation of our club equipment, conservatively valued at over $75,000. We're also looking for support from the city for locating interim storage options for our specialized and relatively fragile boats and equipment. And also any assistance that the city could offer us in our efforts to locating an alternative waterfront location would be much appreciated. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else from the public that wanted to speak this evening? Thank you, Jason, for coming in and giving us an update on your situation there.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Seeing no one else for public participation, we're gonna move on to, and thank you everybody in the gallery for coming this evening. We're glad that you came.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're now gonna do the document that runs the whole city.
Yeah.
Might wanna put an amendment in there for the.
Thank you everybody for coming. Yeah, they're missing the most exciting part of the, the most exciting of the meeting.
Should I go all around? OCP!
Yeah,
Oh yeah, that'll do it,
yeah. They're all gonna become excited. What does that mnemonic stand for? Okay, so moving on to item 12, recommendations from staff. So, where did I put that? So, following community engagement on the first draft of the official community plan update, staff are proposing approximately 15 changes of note and over 125 minor changes for the second draft. Council is requested to review, comment, and provide direction on staff on the resulting list of changes to the draft OCP. So, basically, we have the team here. We've got Natalie, we've got Ken, and coming into us from downtown Montreal is we have
DJ
Alex, who is staying up late to be able to participate with us. So thank you, Alex, for being here.
My pleasure. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Alex.
Who is going to?
Alex is gonna present tonight.
Okay, Alex, over to you.
All right, sounds good. I'll share my screen in for the presentation. Just give me a second here. Yeah, I looked like we were gonna have a full house for this presentation, but everyone left. There's just us.
for a moment.
So this evening, as I've seen in the report, we want to give you a brief update on what happened with our Housing Accelerator Fund application, and then present a few of the highlights without getting into too much detail from the What We Heard report from the consultation we did in January and February on the official community plan, and then get into that list of proposed changes with over 150 items in it. We'll do our best not work through it, but hopefully you've had a chance to review it, and we can discuss anything in there, and we'll be listening for your direction on how to proceed with that list of proposed changes as we look at preparing a second draft of the OCP. So first and foremost, I believe most of the council is already aware, to say it formally, our application to the Housing Accelerator Fund from CMHC was not successful in the end, unfortunately. I was able to meet with our CMHC representative a couple of weeks after hearing the unfortunate news, try and get some feedback, what went wrong. The answer was we got very positive feedback. The application was great. We did everything right. She really had nothing critical to say other than that. Where we lost a couple points was there were a couple policies that were sort of self-declared as being high impact, and the CMHC underwriters decided that they weren't high impact but rather medium impact, which was just enough to lose a few points. And given that the acceptance rate was only 26%, we were part of the 3 out of 4 applicants whose applications were not successful, unfortunately. We did provide some feedback as well too, I'll say, by the way, to CMHC as well on this process, which was quite time consuming in a number of ways, having gone through a couple of rounds as well too, that it was a very big ask for small municipalities, and we had I think a productive discussion on that as well too. The amount of resources that go into that is a big deal for a small city like Nelson, and then we were expecting to have a higher acceptance rate than 26%. So moving forward, we don't have it. There were a few policies in the first draft of the OCP that went out in January. We still hadn't had any news from CMHC at that point. A few of those policies were sort of setting the stage in case our half application were to be successful. So as you'll see in the document, we're proposing to soften some of those and make a few changes now that we don't have those commitments and the benefit as well too that we would have had of having almost $5 million in funding to help support housing change in the community. A few things have changed. So to get back into the OCP directly, as I said, I'll just highlight a few items, that what we heard reported. So I think over 25 pages, as I recall, plus all of the appendixes to it. But overall, we had a really good response rate given that this is the third round of engagement. More people participated than in the previous round a year ago. We had normally a lot more organizations at this point as well too, and fortunately we had some productive contact with 2 First Nations as well too at this stage. I think there was overall from the public, from organizations, from First Nations, there was definitely more of a willingness to engage now that we had a first draft to actually talk about. We'll get into the numbers of what it means to have had approximately 332 people involved at this point. But I think it's important to highlight too the amount of passive engagement, as I like to call it. There were over 2,000 unique visitors. So that doesn't double count people who visited the website multiple times, but over 2,000 people, 2,000 computers, let's say, connected to the website, 2,000 households connected to the website over the engagement period. And the actual OCP, PDF of 150 pages was downloaded almost 800 times. So that means, quite a few people actually took a look at it, not just the website, but actually looked at the first draft, even though they didn't necessarily participate in the survey. So there were 2 surveys, if you recall. Just as a reminder, there was a policy survey, which was intended that you don't have to necessarily read the whole OCP to be able to participate. We asked specific questions to get feedback on specific policy ideas. And what we got out of that is that, overall, most people were overall supportive of the draft OCP, and all of the 16 policies that were included in that survey received the support of the majority of respondents. There's more details on what people had to say in there, but overall we can summarize that by saying that the majority, that all of the policies received majority support, and that the policy with the most consensus around it, or the most support were the policies around protecting heritage buildings in the community. The second survey that went out was a feedback form, which was more targeted at people who were actually going to be able to, take some time to read at least a bit of the draft OCP. That feedback form started off with 2 questions, a score of, scale 1 to 10. Do you feel that this represents you, and do you feel that the draft represents the community as a whole? I think so. Overall, just over half. We look at the sort of average and median scores. Just over half of respondents say that it did. I think it's really interesting. I think there'd be some people in sociology who'd be really interested in taking a look at these numbers too. That people said that the draft OCP represents the community even more than it represents them themselves. People saying, okay, maybe this document doesn't represent me and everything I think and I want, but when I take a step back, we can see that people actually said were more likely to say that it represented the community as a whole, which is very interesting, I think. And slightly more support too from people who declared that they actually live within city limits as well too. Then after those questions, people said, we asked open-ended questions, what were the strengths and weaknesses, over what the most common responses on the strengths were that we're prioritizing housing and affordability, but there's a lot in there around livability as well too in the community, walkability, active transportation, health, etc. And that the document, there was a lot of compliments too on the document being easy to read and navigate and understand. The weaknesses in that section, the most common one was people criticizing that the draft OCPs implies that we need to grow, and saying, people asking, do we actually need to grow? Do we need to add more housing? Either people just asking that as a question or saying that we don't, that the city should not grow. Secondly, there were comments that the OCP is lacking detail and that it should be prioritizing the actions and policies in there, creating a hierarchy and have an action plan. And thirdly, the third most common comment was that there should be more support for recreation and volunteer nonprofit groups in the community. So the question that we get a lot is, and we've got throughout the process is, is it enough? We look at, okay, just over 330 people participated in this stage of engagement. When we take a step back, now that we've gone through 3 phases of engagement in the last 2 years, we can say, that at least 1,100 individuals actively participated at least one time. So actively, that means, they went to an open house, they participated they completed a survey, and depending on, we don't know, often, most likely people participated in one or more phases as well too, in many cases, but not always. But we can say at least 1,100, possibly up to 1,700 individuals actively participated. But again, when we look at the passive participation, since 2013, the project website has had over 4,700 unique visitors. So a lot of people are paying attention. Goes to say that the communication strategy, I'd say, is very successful. It's just, for I think various reasons, the case that not everyone actively participates in the process. So we look at the population of age 15 and more in the city. We consider that at least 1 out of 9 residents actively participated at least once in the last 2 years as part of this process. When we compare to other cities, I think the trend is generally that the smaller the place, the more people are participating in their OCP processes. So Revelstoke and Castlegar had a slightly higher participation rate, but really, we're talking about 11% versus 12.5%. And then when we look at the big cities, who have massive communications teams and a dozen planners working on this and people specialize in public engagement, even then we're talking about really a fraction of the population who gets involved. So it's we can say it's a pity for sure, but I think it is important to take into consideration, to compare a little bit, and to understand that this isn't this is a general phenomenon. There's engagement fatigue. People are busy, and we know as well that it can be hard to engage in this kind of high level policy as well too. So if I get into the other big document that we sent your way as part of this agenda package, the list of proposed changes. So there's quite a few. Why so many? They come from various sources. So a lot are tied to engagement from the public, from the letters we received from community organizations, notably from the Sinaiaks as well too. We've been in conversation with the Tanaha. We haven't yet received a letter from them, so that's why you see a lot more input from the Sinaiaks in the list of changes, from the Cultural Development Commission as well, to various bodies that have reviewed, including our lawyer as well too. Not surprisingly, there were some corrections to be made as well too from the lawyer's perspective, and additions by staff as well too, with as we've taken the time to discuss more and react to and consider public feedback and reflect more on the process. There were a few staff initiated changes in that list as well. So in the table that's attached, there's over 150 changes altogether. We've highlighted in gray the key ones that we wanted to draw your attention to, but in order to save time for conversation and discussion, and ensure that Mayor and Council can talk about the ones that you want to talk about, we're not going to highlight all of them in the presentation. Just a couple. Notably on land use, and I preface this by saying as well too that we weren't planning on getting too much into detail on these land use policies today necessarily, as we're planning a workshop with you shortly to focus on land use and housing policies. A lot of this being intertwined. OCP is first and foremost a land use document with a lot of other policies that attached to it as well too, but there's a lot in here to unpack and to discuss as well too. So of course we can answer any questions today, but the idea is that the land use specific, these big ticket important land use items, that we'll workshop them shortly with you. But just to highlight for information what's included in staff's list of proposed changes for the second draft. Number one is redesignating the former landfill site in the West Waterfront from park land use designation to public utility lands, given the urgent need to have land to be able to expand the public works yard, but still allowing for parks and trails in public utility lands in order to have flexibility and be able to create that kind of space for the public where possible. And secondly, you'll have seen in the What We Heard report, we actually received quite a bit of feedback, letters and in the feedback form regarding the airport. Normally criticism of the way that the airport is being discussed in the OCP, calling it a land bank. So given that feedback that we got, we were looking at and proposing to amend the policy, instead of calling it a land bank, to say, we recognize, we acknowledge, we hear what you're saying, and we know that there's a lot more to study as well too. It's a complex issue. There's a lot of users of the airport as well too. There's a lot of costs as well associated, and it is a big parcel of land as well too. To say, instead of saying it's a land bank, saying we're going to study this in the future. The final slide here on the list of changes, if we can get into conversation, is around the implementation section and the targets as well too. You'll see there's quite a few changes in there, notably following our last conversation, the OCP in January, and some of the feedback we heard first from you and also from the public as well too, and a few community organizations that the implementation policies, how we were going to act on climate, was both unclear and not strong enough. So we're coming back with a couple of proposals to strengthen those policies and show the community that we are serious about climate action and implementing Nelson Next, embedding that in the OCP, while still acknowledging, as I said, we heard a lot from the public that there should be more of an implementation plan and a hierarchy, prioritization, and actions, but recognizing that that's actually not what the OCP is. We understand why people would like it to be that, but the OCP is a very long-term, high-level document, and that's we prioritize differently, as you know. So, finally, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at for next steps, we're looking to you for further direction at this point today, and shortly coming back to you as well too for a resolution confirming public engagement. I'll discuss that in May, but from the Local Government Act, we need a council resolution to validate that sufficient engagement has occurred in the OCV process. We'll be workshopping land use and housing with you as well too. We'll be going to the Advisory Planning Commission, and as soon as possible, depending on all the feedback we get and how much work that is, we'll be coming back with a second draft. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Okay, councillors, do you have any particular questions that you'd like to have that perhaps are at a higher level right now than, because we are going to be having a future workshop where we'll be able to dive into some of, I would say, the gray highlighted areas a bit more. I think as you read through them, a lot of them you can see that I think we won't have to discuss, but I think there are those ones, particularly regarding housing and heights and setbacks and zones and whatever, and that's why we're having an additional meeting in the future to discuss those. Councillor Page and then Lockenberg.
Yeah, thanks for the update, Alex, and putting it all together. It was great in review. Looking at your slides, so I'll just start us out a little soft here and see what kind of other questions come along the lines. But with Nelson Next, a key element of that plan was refreshing the list of priorities and a process whereby we would do that. And so I just looked at that wording a little bit and about lifting up the different priorities, but I would wonder if we would want to augment it and actually touch on that this plan should be refreshed on some sort of regular cycle so that we are discovering new actions. And I think we can probably fit that in. Yeah, I see Natalie nodding, so.
Yeah, sometimes we use standard wording that says or as replaced or amended from time to time.
Which was so core to that plan, that you would evaluate, test, pilot, and innovate, and then that's such a big part of the plan.
That's right, that diagram is coming to my mind.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, we can add
I wanna capture that.
we can add some wording in there about updating the tactics, yeah.
Great.
Councillor Lockenberg, then Councillor Payne.
Easy.
Alex or you two, the land bank and the airport and the land bank language, can you just, was that, who initiated that and?
The land bank language is in the current
Yeah.
OCP.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the origins of that language.
Oh, no, sorry, I mean the change.
The revision.
Who initiated the change to the new language?
The change was initiated by a number of letters that we received from the user groups of the airport.
Okay.
And basically, it was just kind of saying higher level, we should look at this and study all the aspects of it. And I think that would be something likely council would do anyway in the future. And I think the term land bank obviously upset those user groups. So.
Right. I just wanna flag that because I referenced the aerodrome as a land bank quite a bit. And I found that very helpful to maintain its the original intent and the future development. I worry a little bit about we set ourselves, if we remove that, we set ourselves on a default mode to be, it's an airport or an aerodrome unless there's a really compelling alternative, as opposed to had other visions for it all along. It's not something new, this was the original vision. So I just wanted to flag that as a caution, because I definitely know in the community, certainly going back to my first election, way back to 2018, that was a big issue for people. The question about the aerodrome and its future, and why was it not, why is the best and highest use of that land not housing? And the idea at the time, or my response has been consistently over the time, we'll look at that when it rises to need, and that's something we've always had our sights on. So I just wanted to raise that as something that's been persistent. It's not a new thing. It's been as long as I've been here. It's been a conversation.
It was purposefully at that time.
Yeah, and just so you know, and I mean, there's three of us here that were at this meeting, because I've always liked the land bank. I mean, that's something that's kind of like, it's two words and it makes a picture in my head.
Yeah.
Versus this nice description that we have now. But the committee, when we did discuss this at our last meeting, and the committee also sort of had more comfort with this description. There was a couple people that still like the idea of land bank, because it's just two words that resonate with people.
Yeah.
But there was a feeling from the advisory group that they had some comfort with this change, in terms of the fact that, it is one of the last large pieces of land that we have, and that whatever happens does have to be done with due consideration. And I think that's what the description is trying to say, is that there's not gonna be like a light switch. One day it's an airport and the next day it's no longer an airport. And so I think that might give comfort to people that might be on either side of the airport fence in some capacity. But I'm just trying to reflect what I heard that day. I don't know if Councillor Payne or Councillor Woodward felt that they heard something different, but just so you know that the committee looked at that, and there's some people that have been long-term residents of Nelson, quite a few newer residents. They don't have, so some people don't have like the history, but there was some comfort.
Yeah.
With that, but
I'll just add, that wasn't the conversation at our table, so might have been a mixed group. That's when we were divided the two tables, right? Yeah.
What was
Our table didn't feel that there needed to be, I didn't hear
Any
any
change?
conversation that there needed to be any change. I mean, if you're confused about the land bank terminology, I think that's easily explained, and if you need to hear all the other words, but what was the rationale back in 2014 was the last I was speaking? 13, thank you.
I think exactly what Councillor Lautenberg talked about was, there's no urgency to, to make a different use of this at this time. However,
People feel there's an urgency now?
No, I think in terms of the land bank, that's why it was identified as a land bank, that, it would be something potentially in the future, but until the community developed out, there was no urgency to change the use, but.
And thoughtfully planned and considered at that time.
Yeah. If I may, 'cause I figured out how to say it more eloquently, I think, and thank you for that, and thank you for that. The notion, I don't wanna lose the history and what the default is, and in my mind, that land, what we're looking for is the highest and best use. Currently, it's an aerodrome, and maybe for another generation it will be an aerodrome, but at some point you can imagine that the highest and best use would be housing or something else. So land bank for me kind of captures that default.
More flexible.
I'm gonna jump on this for a second here. I would like to see us in some fashion commit to going down that path, because the situation as it stands now is, with the idea that it may be developed into something else, restrains the development of that facility in trying to achieve, you know, how it could be the best aerodrome or take it to the next level or develop into something else. And similarly, the idea that there's not necessarily a sense of when the aerodrome would no longer be there, if that happens to be a pathway that ends up, no one starts chipping away at what that would be until it reaches some sort of breaking point. I know we had discussed in the past when we had taken on more of the operations of the aerodrome, that need to set up a long-term strategy and what that might look like what are the checkpoints into our future where we start to seriously evaluate if it's going in a direction of development and building that facility up into something that is bringing more revenue into the city, is earning more service fees and whatever that might look like, or if we're putting some sort of timeline on it, because we are seeing development down there. And I'm just bringing it up now because in the scope of this 10 years, you know, we've got the Kulos projects, we've got the other projects nearby, the land's getting cleared not far from there. I think we're entering into that window now where we need to have some clarity of whether we're getting space for a generation or we're getting space for 10 years. So I would like, at least if we're a future study area, I'd like to make sure we're doing that and embarking on that in the next couple of years.
I'm just wondering if there's a way to combine the two concepts. So I'm hearing, you know, the default is, it's a future land bank. However, there needs to be some study towards what's the medium term solution? The longer term solution is land bank, but maybe there's a way to convey both, because I think you're hearing from staff, this wouldn't flip a light switch and, we need to, maintain that as an aerodrome in the interim, but we may not wanna add a bunch of aerodrome type new facilities there if it's for a interim period, even a generation, right? So.
Or we determine there's actually a really key critical requirement around wildfire services or evac that we absolutely are never gonna sacrifice, and so it's gonna be there for 100 years. And so maybe that shifts somehow, we look at it as a facility and how we could actually get better use out of it as a whole.
So perhaps we can ask staff, just so that we don't belabor this too much, because again, it's gonna come back to us, this isn't the final. Let's just see if you can wordsmith that concept a little bit more to, somehow, we recognize it's a big piece of land, but at the same time, right now it's an aerodrome and there could be something different in the future, which has always been, even since when I started in 1999, that aerodrome land has come and gone and come and gone and come and gone in terms of, and there's been a lot of concern raised by people over that time, and so I don't think that wave is going anywhere in this OCP or maybe the next OCP, but people see it. Actually, I have Councillor Payne next and then Councillor.
Mine is another line item, so if we're still on the aerodrome, I'm fine to refer to, okay. Are we done with the aerodrome then?
I think we're gonna, because they're gonna come back to us again, so we can have that in this next workshop.
Another conversation.
Right past.
Because I am interested to know who the lots of the users at the airport are, aerodrome, whatever we wanna call it. I'm interested who the users are, is it how significant a portion of the population and what is but that's part of the next process, I guess. On page 19, number 48, it is grayed out. I'm interested, there's a staff recommendation to add, the city will pursue construction of a new fire hall that meets the community's needs and safety standards. So we all know we're gonna do this, and we presume that at some point in time, we're gonna pursue the build of a new library and possibly the build of a new police station or whatever else the community needs. I'm unclear as to why this is specifically in here. Why do we need to say that in the OCP, which is an aspirational document around land use? That's what I'm unclear about.
Maybe I can take a stab at it. I think the fire hall was just more of a current issue, and something that had been talked about more recently at council. It is a long-term planning document, but it's just noted that the fire hall is kind of nearing the end of its life in terms of that use for the fire hall. But yes, you're right, we're not talking about every facility and every building that needs to be replaced or moved, that sort of thing. It's just more of a current issue.
I guess that's what I'm confused about. Why do we need to name it at all?
I think some of the conversation around that too was just that it's, you know, as council knows, we're having troubles finding a location for the new fire hall. And as such, to have it referenced in a document, you know, as that extra level of support, should we find a place that is perhaps not where people think it maybe should go. Right, so it's adding it in now to say, look, we need a new spot for a fire hall. It's, you know, we're adding it into the OCP because we do need that. It's a critical piece of infrastructure in our community. And, you know, if we end up putting it somewhere where someone's unhappy, then it's at least we can point to our OCP supports that use, right? Or that
It
initiative.
doesn't support the use in any particular place. It just says, I don't know, it just seems irrelevant to me that we would name something specific like that. Because it's the only facility that is named as far as I recall. We've named one city facility.
Yeah, we can have a look at that.
It just doesn't make sense. It's incongruous is what I guess I'm trying to say with the rest of the document.
I agree with Chris though, like it's the same thing I thought when you asked the question is, if it comes down to it, you're being upfront with the community that this is present priority, and well, from a policy kind of perspective, you might have cleaner language, not doing that on a very large document. In this case, if there's unknowns that come down the chute, you've got this additional support that's already baked into your adopted policies. So I say for the bit of messiness, for lack of a better term, that it might do, it provides more support for that project regardless.
You know,
To alleviate messiness at all points in time when I'm trying to communicate clearly to the population, but.
Well, if we communicate, we're gonna build a fire hall.
Yeah.
And maybe we should be just a little more specific in terms of identifying that, you know, there are maybe limited sites for a fire hall. You know, it's kind of a unique building, that it has to be located in a certain, you know, response area, and maybe we need to do a better job of identifying it. I would say that's the unique part of the fire hall versus a library or a city hall or some other thing, so.
And I understand the argument of that, you know, it might be next door to my house.
Right.
Right? And the fact that it's in the document, I mean, it's like, it's a public this is a building that's about public safety, so I tend to sort of agree with it being in there. I have to say, I had the same thought that you've just had about why are we mentioning this when there's potentially lots of other buildings? But the impact for some people living next to a fire hall might not be that exciting. I grew up living next to a fire hall. Wasn't really a issue. I mean, you kind of just get used to it like you do many things, like living next to the airport, like on the North Shore.
Or the rail track.
Yeah, so, yeah, so I think we can have some further.
I think the challenge comes with that when you're changing the use. Somebody is
Yeah.
currently living there without it, now they're living there with it,
With it.
right?
Exactly.
And, you know, we're gonna have a meeting tomorrow where there's gonna be some people that speak against having their neighborhood changing. So when you buy a house that's immediately next to a fire hall, you kind of know what you're getting into. Fire hall pops up next to your house. It's a bit different. It's good to have the policy support there. But I do hear your
I don't see
point.
how this helps that situation. Doesn't say where it is, but.
I think we can maybe
Yeah,
work on
okay,
that piece
next.
a little bit
No,
more.
I'm not gonna die on that hill. I just,
Yeah.
it was just incongruous to me when I was reading through it.
That's a good point, yeah.
Didn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, I absolutely hear your point.
Councillor, did you have anything further, Councillor Payne?
Not about that.
No, I wanna know if Councillor Payne had it.
Oh,
No,
yes.
I'm,
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. So I just, cause I was on the committee and as we went through this process, I think one thing that's kind of stuck with me that worries me a bit about the whole process is that it's a bit of a snapshot of now, of people's concerns now. And when we look at 10 years ago, what the concerns were quite different, and that was kind of a snapshot of them. And it kind of reminds me of like a point in time count or something like that. It's always gotta be this snapshot, and the world's changing quickly. So I guess, you know, the vagueness that maybe some people complain about is, I think, inherent in that it needs to be somewhat vague. Because if we're too tightly wound around this time, then our decision-making processes as we use this document may not be what needs to be. So I guess just a comment that you know, that this was an incredible effort over 2 years and so much reaching out to the community. But again, it is a 11% of the population, and it's a lot of the concerns that are sticking out are kind of like concerns of now. So I guess as planners, of course, you obviously know that. So you must, when you're making decisions off of the OCP, that must be a concern or a consideration, I would imagine, yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely gonna be issues in here that are more current for today, absolutely. But the intent of this document is that a lot of these policies are long range and broad, so that they will carry the city through hopefully 5 to 10 years of growth and change. Now the legislation is requiring us to update this every 5 years, so council at that time could say, hey, you know what, maybe also look at this section or go for engagement for more feedback on these areas. So there'll be more opportunities, I think, to be able to check back. I think the document will still be relevant for another 5 years. Like even with Nelson Next, I know things are changing, it still is very relevant.
Yes.
So I think there's two things. I think, yes, it talks about current issues, but it also is very forward-looking, and there's more opportunities to have engagement, so.
Yeah, I would just add as well too that that part of it, you know, it's hard to make a document that's not a snapshot in time to project ourselves. Well, we're trying to project ourselves in the future, but we can't. We can't time travel, and there's the values element as well too in it. So there are policies that some of them are very general, high level. Maybe, you know, the fire hall one as written, we were just talking about, is one of those, and some of those are much more specific and detailed. But there's the values in the vision, and that's, you know, the intention of an OCP is that we keep coming back to that. And every once in a while that vision can get updated. Even the 2013 OCP didn't create a new vision. It was still using one from 2008. It's something we can refresh from time to time, but regardless of what the issues we're looking at are, you know, as Natalie said, in 5 years we have to update it, but in 4 years' time, whatever issues we're looking at, we can come back and look at those, you know, those values, that vision, and the policies that are in there to help guide decisions, right? It's really there to guide and to create, you know, a certain level of certainty, but it's a guidance document. I can't stress that more, you know, too much. There are policies when they're very firm, right, where the city can't contradict its OCP. So that is something to, you know, pay attention to. You know, if we had a policy that said the fire hall will be built in Rosemont, you couldn't build it in Uphill. You know, that kind of very specific thing, which is, you know, why coming back to, you know, why I can't be too detailed with respect to implementation, because anytime the plans change because the budget changes, another priority comes up, that would mean amending the whole thing and going through public hearing, which is not a very efficient process to go through. So,
just as a point of clarification, I'm not criticizing at all. I'm just being part of the process in the way that Councillor Payne and I were, and the mayor. It really, like, it was just like, you know, people are very concerned about the issues of now, which is, of course, that's what they're going to be. But I think the city has to continually look 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So it's this funny place that we find ourselves in, where we're always future casting, but also working right now, what needs to happen in the city right now in operations and such. But it's a challenging place. The city is in.
I think it's an interesting thing, and, you know, I've been thinking about it since I reviewed this slide deck. You know, the sort of the median number that people landed on if this represents your community was 6, right?
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, what are we really looking for there, right? Are we looking for it to be like a 9 or a 10?
Right.
Do we have a completely homogenous society? Or do we have a diverse, eclectic society that would, look at the plan and everybody's like, yeah, I'm on the high, like on the good side of okay with it, right? So to me, it seems like it might actually have some legs, that for that longevity, because it's like the old adage of, that you struck a good deal when everybody leaves like not fully happy, but because then nobody won, nobody lost, right?
True.
So I guess, I'm not sure that I've necessarily thought that out entirely, and maybe I shouldn't have brought it up, but to me, that seems interesting for a long-term planning document like that, where you have people saying that, yeah, this mostly reflects the community that I know. More than average or more than halfway reflects the community that I know.
It's a big tent.
It's a big tent. There's a lot of diversity in that tent. And I think that, that's the magic, right? The magic isn't that everybody comes here with the same idea. The magic is that everybody has these different ideas and it all cooks into this unique thing, right?
It fits under the tent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
It's a counterculture, I think it was, right?
Counselor Tate, you're next up.
I note the lack of the word authentic, but I actually have 3 questions. I don't know if we're just doing one each, and I don't want to spend too long on any of them, but where to begin? I'm gonna go with the easiest one first. There's the letter from Disc Golf, and they wanted to be included, and how do you stick handle that? It's in Blewett. Like, I just found that really interesting. Their letter said, bring us into the OCP, but it's in Blewett. So teach me how you stick handle that.
It is in the city of Nelson. It's just in that little skinny piece that's not attached to the city of Nelson.
Oh, over
Yes,
there. Oh, I
yes.
get it. Okay. My bad.
No, that's okay. It's
over by the hydro.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Stop there. My second.
We all saw it at the committee too. It was
Yeah, we were like, what? Thank you.
Had that stock answer ready.
Yeah, great. So the neighborhood nodes, when the map came, thank you, I was surprised that the Fairview nodes were so low, because I thought we had talked about kind of close to the 10th Street campus as a neighborhood node. Can you expand on that, or how I misunderstood that so vibrantly in my mind?
For sure, so that map, the one with the pink and
Yeah.
the yellow on it, is actually showing 2 different concepts. So there's the neighborhood nodes where we would support potentially small scale commercial.
Okay.
So corner stores, restaurants, that sort of thing.
Yes.
And then the areas in yellow are the neighborhood planning areas.
I did not see the yellow. I need
It is, now that I look at
So
it,
you
very
changed the
small.
name.
Okay,
You
gotcha.
changed the name from what it was before.
Yes, and we also changed the name.
And I saw the 5-block walk.
Yeah,
Take out the 10 minutes. Thank you, super helpful. Okay, now the maybe more interesting conversation has to do with page 15 of the document, page 18 of the PDF number 44, which is the height changes. So I'm curious about the nuance policy for different heights depending on the type of residential building. And I thought we should maybe discuss that, because it says up to 4 stories in residential areas, or up to 5 stories elsewhere, but up to 6 stories could be considered for rezoning applications for non-market affordable housing. I have a curiosity about different rules for different developers.
Yeah, Alex, do you wanna kinda?
Well, I think this is why we wanna workshop this.
This is why we're
That's
gonna
the
workshop.
workshop? Okay.
The
we'll do
workshop is
that.
gonna be about the heights and the housing
Yeah.
mainly.
And do you want that type of policy? That's why we thought it was important to workshop it.
Right, so interesting, okay. When we workshop it, can you bring other examples so that we can compare, obviously? Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
I would add, I think there's a couple things to consider there. One, why it's, we're talking about institutional lands there, right? And the specificity of those is that, for example, take a example from the, it had a lot of the land use designations are in very specific areas or specific types of areas. Like, for example, the downtown is mostly mixed use core. So mixed use core is not going to be an uphill. Anything that's designated mixed use core is downtown. So we kind of know the context that we're talking about. The problem, if you will, with institutional lands is that they're all over the place. We're talking about I think RDCK building on Lakeside, as well as public interior health buildings as well too, the hospital, properties owned by churches. There's all kinds of things going on in different places. So it's hard to, if we just say up to X number of stories, we're talking about a really very vastly different context. Some of those parcels are large and more downtown, like the NDCC, and some of them are like the really small churches that are in a residential neighborhood. So if we say only up to 4 stories, well, then that means that, on a parcel that's more central, we would be limiting institutional height to something lower than what would be allowed on the neighboring parcel, which is mixed use core. But if we say up to 6 stories, well, then that means we're saying, pick any church in a residential area and, they could build up to 6 stories.
Right. Thank you, through the chair. So I think I'm understanding that because this would simplify a process to build residential on what is currently zoned institutional. So you would not have to, for example, zone from I2 to R4 to build residential. My curiosity is about a different height for non-market affordable housing. So I'd like to just talk more about that.
So we'll do that.
I think that's what's gonna be in the workshop.
Yeah, thank you, but the institutional part is really interesting, thank you.
Okay. And just as a reminder as well too, it's hard, even for us to stay on topic sometimes between the land use designations, the OCP and zoning, but we really have to keep those separate as well too. What's zoning bylaws say, what does the OCP say? This does not change zoning at all. So say if we were to go forward with this change as drafted right now, that doesn't change any, as of right development rights, the day after the OCP is adopted. All that would mean is that there'd be support for council to consider and for applicants in the community to consider if someone came in to either it could be a staff initiated or city initiated rezoning, but it could also be an applicant initiated one. Right now we haven't changed the zoning bylaw, so anything that's institutional is still capped at 12 meters, so 3-4 stories, let's say. But this is just, this would be giving the opportunity to consider a change to zoning without having to amend the OCP.
Oh.
And again, we'll talk about it at the workshop.
But it's a flag, maybe we can explain the hierarchies
Mhm.
too. In the process, okay.
Thank you.
I think it'd be good to get clarity too when we have that. The discussion will be public, and I think it's good to get that really clear in everybody's mind that the OCP is not the zoning.
Yeah.
The OCP really is. I always think about the OCP as kind of like the wish list or whatever, or as Alex probably more politically put it correctly, the guidance document. And then, you've got that guidance, but then when you actually wanna do the work, you still might have to change zoning or
Right.
or some policy or something in the next layer down of the multi-layered onion.
So like, for example, those far lands that are being rehabilitated that used to be the landfill, like you would envision what that could be in the future with the OCP, but it's not zoned for building anything on it.
Yeah, although, traditionally in Nelson, we've done an OCP, then we've amended the zoning bylaw to realize
To
the
realize it afterwards.
OCP.
So that's
So-
the outline.
Yeah, so
Okay.
some communities only do the OCP and they require rezoning for all the things, and we have what's referred to as progressive policy, where we rezone up front so that it's clear you don't have to go through this additional process. And those large, that's part of the reason why the province, stepped in and required targets and required, went to small, the SMU thing, because local governments were controlling, yes, the OCP said that, but they were controlling what happened by zoning and creating, that administrative 2 years, 3 years to actually build anything. So we've had taken the opposite approach to be progressive, and people know what they can build here. Our zoning bylaw aligns with it, so the intent, unless we hear different from council, is future stages is to change the zoning to align with your OCP.
Councillor Page and then Councillor Lockenberg.
just taking us back to the neighborhood planning areas, and the yellow areas that were added in. When I look at Selkirk, the upper Fairview area, I'm kind of to a point there too with Granite. At this high level, does it make sense to kind of be carving it out into, delineated into those big institutional pieces, specifically to the Selkirk lands, versus kind of covering that the neighborhood plan might incorporate the upper bench there in its totality, because it's really, you know, it's about where those integrations come, the zoning will come in with that specificity based on what the planning ends up saying. But I look at that, I feel like it really should be more of an area plan, or when I think neighborhood plan, I feel it covers more than just those lands to be developed in some of those institutional pieces, but really where does the neighborhood end for the small homes? Where do we start envisioning the mixed use? Where do we start envisioning something more? What does that transition look like? That's what I feel the conversation will be anyway, so.
Just to clarify, so you were suggesting potentially changing the boundary of the neighborhood?
Yeah, just so like that natural like you kind of drop down that street on Gordon, and once you drop down, you know, it's not really the same kind of impact, but when you're on the upper bench, you know, that's your natural neighborhood, that's kind of where you go for to walk the dog. Right, so that, for a neighborhood plan, that's where it feels that you would kind of.
So are you suggesting that what is currently single family have some thought whether that would remain single family? That's why you would have a larger boundary?
Well, cause it's a mix, right, aren't you?
Well, right now, most of it's developed out as single family, right?
Right.
So you could say, let's look at this, should it remain just single family? Which becomes, you know, up to 4 units now. If that's what the area you wanna look at versus, cause I think the undeveloped lands are the area that's been identified. So you could certainly, you know, when you look at those undeveloped lands, you're gonna look at it in context of what's there. So that will happen. I would say you would expand your boundaries if you're saying, right now, that's single family, we wanna consider whether that should be something different.
Yeah, and I'm not, before anyone gets wild on the internet, I'm not suggesting that that's where we go, but I think when you're contemplating that plan by bringing that boundary into just those lands, you lose that opportunity for even the consideration of what more infill or mixed use might even look, cause you've got the Valhalla apartments there.
Like, no, that's quite legitimate, I just wanted to clarify, you know.
Yep, no,
is that
that's
what
kind
you're-
of, that's the natural neighborhood to me, and so maybe there is some change that will be contemplated. Probably not, but probably discussion worth at least having and being scoped out and not pre-narrowed.
And not along the top, all the way behind LVR, like where I can't picture your neighborhood.
Davy Park kind of is that cutoff, and then when it
Oh.
drops down, cause there's that road that
Yeah.
curves that, and it just doesn't drop. What is that road? Is that 9th, 8th?
8th.
Yeah, 8th comes around, and you're kind of naturally on the top of that area, that's the neighborhood. Selkirk sits at the back of it. To me, anyway, just, I look at that and think about how that might get developed and how we, or what people say up there.
I kind of get it. I'd be interested to know if you keep going the other direction as well, because it's Davies Park is a bench all the way across.
We can definitely look at that. Our original intention was to just include the Selkirk College lands. So, but we could explore and see if there's other potential lands that we could include in that neighborhood plan area. But I think at this point, everything that we've sort of communicated to the committee and to the community is that that area is just the Selkirk, or I guess what we're calling the Selkirk lands. So I think from our perspective, Natalie and Alex and I need to maybe take that back and look at it to see if there's any additional lands we could include. Just being cognizant of the fact that we've sort of conveyed a certain message to the community.
Yeah.
Maybe what could help here is, when it comes to Granite, we have a neighborhood plan. So there's defined boundaries because it's occurred. But when we have these, you know, these neighborhood nodes that are envisioning potential area, maybe because Selkirk has not been defined yet. What we really just need in representation is that this would be an area for a neighborhood plan. And at some point it will come down, it can simply be a discussion for later.
So why don't we, again, talk about this further
Yeah.
at the workshop?
So now just turn it to a clarity.
I'm gonna go to Councillor Lockworth who's next, then Councillor Payne.
Yeah, on a completely different track. First of all, I didn't say this before, but great work overall, the way it's laid out, and also all the considerations, the way you integrated the public feedback. One of the ones though that jumps out at me, and I worry that it will jump out at other people, and not in a good way, is 105. New policy 5.10.1.7. The champion projects that help all community members cultivate and grow racist and intercultural competencies, fostering a sense of belonging for residents and visitors. Love the sentiment. The language, especially given that we're in this political moment now, so I'm maybe more sensitive than now having the conversations. But the language anti-racist intercultural competencies are terms that you have to have, like, for them to have the meaning that you want them to have, you have to have quite a bit of background. And the people that they're meant to reach don't have that background, so they get interpreted as, I think, at least based on the conversations I've been having with people, as performative, triggering. They put meaning onto those terms that aren't meant to be there, but that's just the way the world works. And the goal of the policy, especially in the context of 5, is to foster diversity and inclusivity, all really pro-social values that I think everybody, regardless of the political spectrum, would really embrace. So I think it doesn't get us what we want to get us, and it's almost like putting in some Easter eggs for people to latch onto and be like, aha, this is a woke document again, more wokeness, woke. And I'm just like, God damn it, and then it becomes a distraction, and it becomes like
a border.
Yeah, it's just like, anyways, it feels like a lot of productive conversations get derailed by just triggering words, and I think those are the way that's phrased just happens to be triggering when if you look at the 5 section, policy after policy is defining a set of values that are great and universal. This doesn't necessarily add any additional content to those values, and I think it just puts some red meat there for people to fight over. So that's my feedback.
Well, and you know what, and we can have that, we can all muse on that and come back with, but obviously it's been flagged in gray, so, it's a statement of concern that might need some change or whatever. Councillor Payne.
I'm just gonna say that language came through the CDC, where the intercultural communities group sits.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, okay, I just want to make
Very,
sure that
very
that
clear,
language
yeah.
came from
Yeah.
the people who work in that area. So do we provide the leadership to stand strong around that concept and that language? Or do we think we're antagonizing someone?
My response would be, do we provide leadership around the values and the intent and the outcomes?
Yeah.
Or do we get stuck on language that actually does the opposite, that derails what we're trying to accomplish?
I would love to have someone vet that for me better.
Yeah, me too.
So I would,
Me too.
yeah, from both sides is what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say. I wanna see where you're gonna throw down the red meat and who's gonna grab it.
Yeah.
Can I just ask who the other nation is that has responded? Because I know the Synext contributed significantly.
We've just been in discussions with them.
Okay, so they haven't, and the ONA or the Tanaha?
No, and the ONA we're still missing, right?
Yeah, okay. Because it said 2 up there, so I thought one of them had come in.
Been in discussions, yeah.
Yeah, been in
Yeah,
discussions, but not received a letter, so
Okay.
for that clarification.
you know, it's interesting and, you know, in light of the fact that we're here to, you know, council to agree that sort of engagement has been sufficient, like that's what we're trying to get confirmed with this, you know, session tonight. Today I was on the call with the province regarding our liquid waste management plan. And the engagement over our stage one, so stage 1, 2, 3, we submitted our stage one in the fall and, you know, received some feedback and, you know, what she really stressed is we get that you're not going to be able to necessarily get formal responses. She said, you know, if even those conversations that are had, so we've been in discussion with Tunaha and had discussions, you know, those are the types of things that, let's just document those discussions even, right? Because then we know that the discussions have been had, don't wait for, you know, some formal response back. It's great that we got one from Siniacs, but that might not be ever, you know, what everyone's going to do or every nation's gonna do. So I just think that it's worth noting that, you know, while we haven't gotten a formal response back from Tunaha, it sounds like we have had some good conversations. And so it's worth noting, again, in light of the fact that, you know, staff are bringing this to council tonight to, you know, get direction that yes, engagement was sufficient for this project. That, you know, there has been good engagement with Tunaha. We're still waiting to see if we get anything formal back, but, you know, those conversations are happening, we are building those relationships.
And we did discuss at the committee level that if we were, because we do have some information written in there from about the Tunaha, if we heard back from O&A that we could just, it's pretty simple, we just bring back the document and we do an amendment to the document. I mean, it's not simple, but I mean, it's not like we would be having a whole bunch of discussion, we'd be putting something into the document, but we would have to make an OCP amendment, so it would go through the 3 readings and passage, but it's not, it doesn't break the bank by any means. Yeah, so, yeah. Councillor Payne, do you have anything further?
Thank you.
Councillor Pinero?
Just wanted to, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but commenting on a little bit on what Rick was saying. Not sure where I'm gonna end up, but I think the reason why this is in here, potentially I think as more and more vague sort of ideas about, you know, decolonization or anti-racism or inclusivity or whatever, more of these sort of vague concepts filter into policy documents, they have the tendency to be perceived and in fact to be performative because there is no meat to it at all. It's just fluff. And when you're dealing with, if they're perceived and in actual fact are fluff, then it is performative and people on both sides of that issue will get angry about it. So I understand the need for specifics. I'm not sure how to, like, just to ensure that every member of the community cultivates anti-racist competencies. It seems like a very broad stroke. I think we need to, like, when there's an opportunity and a need, we need to sort of get down into the dirt a little bit more, because I think I've been a part of some of these, you know, really well-meaning indigenization or decolonization or anti-racist work, and while it's well-meaning and comes from, I think, a good place, it often just turns into a performance because there isn't the basis for anything more than that. Like, it's an amazingly complex thing. We're talking about a societal, structural issue that's taken hundreds of years to get to the point where it's at, and just throwing words like indigenization around has the potential to make it, the problem, much worse, not make it better. So I just, you know, I understand why that specifics, there's like, it seems to be like a need or a sort of a yearning for some sort of specific action to go with the fluff, which I think is honorable and a good thing. I'm not sure that this reads right. I kind of agree with Rick in that sense, but I also don't I don't wanna lose our urgency and our ability to actually do good work where it's needed. So that's one for the wordsmiths for sure. I don't know how you do that, to be honest, but I just would speak to that. I think we do need some actual policy and some actual training and some actual work, not just high-minded concepts, because they tend to just, that's all it ends up being, and therefore not helpful and potentially counterproductive, so.
So we're doing this right now. Like, we're already doing this. We're championing. Are we not, through the CDC, through the Capitol, through the museum, through the library? We're doing this work right now.
We're doing it, and sometimes we're doing it successfully, and sometimes we're doing it quite badly, and you know, you're totally,
I don't think we can wait
that
till-
process is gonna be that way.
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
you know, it's not, I don't think it behooves us to like, well, we're doing it. We have to keep looking at it because it's often not very successful, at least from a certain perspective.
The action out of the OCP is developing work plans, is developing, this is not meant to be your implementation plan. This is your, this is where we're trying to go, and, the meat is, getting into work plans and, how do we get there? So I think that's, we're trying to be careful not to make this an implementation plan. We wanna make this as where we're going plan. So.
I thought, like, on this subject matter, I thought I went to the celebration of India night at the
Taste of
Capitol,
India.
Taste of India. And, packed house, the energy was just alive, and it was like this total sharing of culture, and man, my family left there just like, we learned so much. And I think there was like this incredible generation of respect and sharing that happened through that performative process. So for me, I felt like that was the work. That was almost like a piece of that integration of our community with other cultures and sharing, and I mean, that work was being done that night to a packed house.
We're doing it
So,
right now.
yeah, so I just thought it was a really good example of like of Nelson that's been, let's just be honest, it's been a long history of Anglo, very white, but it is shifting and changing.
So,
One thing,
Sorry, it was commenting on him, just
Yeah.
briefing, but you're right.
trying to bring us back to
Yes.
this
Okay.
document. I
Sorry.
mean, we all have a sort of philosophy or an idea about what this statement means, but I'm just gonna go back to Councillor Pinero for a second, then I'm going to Councillor Blackenberg. And I'm gonna see if there's anything else here that needs to be touched on before we try to, in principle, pass this presentation, knowing that we are going to be doing additional work on it. Councillor Pinero.
so just acknowledging what Kevin said, maybe this is a high-level document and therefore inherently vague, so that's point conceded. However, I think, and we do some of this work really well, I think to your point, like, we do food really well, we do dancing really well, we do happy things really well. What we don't do well is the hard work. So, like, my wife was part of a similar presentation about Latino culture, and there was, apart from what she decided to take on, it was mostly just like, you would get the impression that Latin America is just one big party. We need to, and again, this is a little bit beside the point, but I just, the part where the work gets done, you're right, isn't this. We need to set an intention, which is what this is, it's vague and that's the intention. But then where the rubber hits the road is those actual community events or those engagements, and we have to again just keep examining our work there and go a little deeper, I feel. So that's, I think, where this is coming from. I think that's where that is from the Cultural Development Commission. I think that's maybe that maybe is where that sentiment is coming from, and so we just have to make sure that we make up for it on in some other capacity, right?
Yeah, my last point, to be perfectly clear, is that some language bridges political divides and some enhances or stresses political divides. For example, we probably all agree on the values of Black Lives Matter, the values of defund the police, and some of the things intended by those policy philosophies or ideas. But the language itself is meant to be used in some sense to reinforce the division, to be shaming, and it just, the people that you intend to reach are repelled by it. And so you undermine the goal of this, which is to bridge divides, bring people together, challenge people to challenge their own biases, their own assumptions on all fronts. And I think we just have to be careful. These is political language. Whenever you bring in political language, regardless of the intent.
Like a dog whistle.
It's like dog whistles. And even if one side's like, it just means good things, the other side is like, nope, that's woke language. And then that's it. You no longer have a discussion about the content and the intent. You now have a discussion about political differences. So that's my caution. And to your point, Councillor Pinheiro, definitely this is aspirational. The goals of that what the CDC is trying to put forward are aspirational. We really need to, I agree, need to continue to do the hard work of making them happen. So agreement, just political language is the thing that's gonna trip us up.
Okay, so councillors, was there anything else that really sticks out at you? So we've touched on, interestingly enough, some of the gray boxes that aren't really housing specific, except for perhaps Councillor Tate. So you've gotten some feedback on some of the other issues that we see within the document that are of some concern. Not to say that you've heard them all from all of us, but I think that we're in a position where we know we're gonna have a workshop to get into sort of more of those housing and zoning minutiae, which is what this land use document, is supposed to spend most of its time trying to give an overview for. Is there a flavor that we could try to pass the recommendation, that is that council receive the presentation, the what we heard report, and the other attachments? Moved by Councillor Woodward. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lockenberg. Any other comments or concern? And I would imagine if something like wakes you up in the middle of the night tonight, you fire with an email with all three of these people's names attached to it, and it will become part of.
In the morning.
When we have that, well, it's almost morning for Alex, he can just tend to it in another 15 minutes. And it will no doubt be addressed as necessary, so so it's just preparing so that we can also have an effective and efficient next meeting when we workshop things. Councillor Page.
For 83, recreation facilities, can we contemplate changing the word regional district or central Kootenay to local government partners? And the reason I bring it up is and talking about economic development, when we maybe go down a path of how we're an attractive area for tournaments, we may be thinking more about how we're looking at Castlegar and Trail and Salmo in some respect, in terms of where public may access the pool when the pool is closed, and how those are moved across. So when we see regional district central Kootenay, probably one still in there, but I kind of like the local government partners, because that captures everybody.
The second 83. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I see it there. I gotcha.
Okay. I see Ken scribbling madly. So we've had the recommendation moved and seconded. All those in favor, and that carries.
I do have one question that's not in here, but it's semi-related. Fences. Fences are a bylaw, they're not in zoning, is that true?
They're in zoning.
They're in zoning. Oh, I thought that they were
Well,
like,
depends what kind of fence,
okay.
but like fences on residential properties, that is on our zoning bylaw.
Oh, it is in the zoning. Oh, okay. But it's enforced by bylaw or it's enforced by like building inspectors? It just seems like I live in Uphill and lately there is a lot of 6 and 8 foot fences going up. And
That's
it just,
enforced by bylaw,
okay.
and bylaw can check with us on the rules if there's any confusion. But typically it's 2 meters from your front of your house all the way back, and in the front it's 1 meter high.
Yes, I was aware of that. And then there's ones like, there's like the side yard where your house comes to the thing, and then there's the side. I just have a curiosity because it does really change the look and feel of a neighborhood, just like, you know, bigger buildings change the look and feel of a neighborhood. And I was curious when we get to the zoning that aligns with the OCP, if we should somehow take a walk up there. There's been quite a few that have gone up recently, so I was just curious about that.
Well, and I would add to
Yes.
design guidelines around securing buildings, which I brought up in the past.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Around rail, drop gates and metal covers, and there's some municipalities just define the standards, and they'll say things like you can't have a corrugated sheet come down, you have to have holes of a certain, with only so much metal so that you're not disrupting the streetscape. So when we're talking about commercial properties downtown or fencing in a private residential, it's like, what are those design guidelines in terms of I want to secure or contain my property? But obviously, it's like you drastically change the scope of feel of the street or area if you just put the simplest, most obstructive piece of material you can, which is very effective, but.
And it's tricky because some of the streets have that 3 foot buffer between the sidewalk and the property line, and some of them don't. So sometimes you're walking next to like a really, I'm just curious how that all plays in, and it does change the look of the neighborhood, the feel, that interaction, right?
It does, I think those.
On the security gates specifically, what Councillor Page just mentioned, not about fences, but it is part of the proposed new design guidelines for the citywide design guidelines. It's on page 143 of the draft, that the use of window bars and roll down panels on street facing building facades will in most cases not be permitted.
That's throughout the city.
And that would be.
Yeah, for projects that are subject to development permit.
Which would be anything in the downtown, any commercial or industrial buildings. And for fences, it is, it's generally a complaint-based.
Yeah, it's a bylaw driven.
That's why I thought it wasn't in zoning, because I didn't understand. Okay.
Yeah, it is in zoning, but it is typically complaint-based, the fence issue.
There you go. Now you
They
know.
talk to us for any planning questions.
We're in the planning department.
It's okay, but now we know we're all gonna go on walks around Kate's neighborhood and somebody else can.
With a measuring tape.
I know where this came from.
Okay, people, we're not quite finished here because I did move council reports to the end of the agenda, so we do have council reports. Thank you, you guys.
Thanks, guys.
We'll see you at the next meeting.
Tomorrow, can't wait.
Yes, in a row.
Yeah, so and that's the other thing, is to try to get out here in a timely fashion. We might be here for a while tomorrow, so hopefully we can be done by 9. And so going back to council reports, Councillor Payne, you usually always have something, so I'll let you lead off.
I'll be really brief, I'm gonna save some things for next time, but I do wanna mention that Earth Day is April 22nd. I tried to look up the anniversary, but I can't remember how long ago it was, so it's been going on for a long time.
It's the 70s.
And yeah, and this year, the theme is Our Power, Our Planet, which I think is an interesting thing to think of. But a group of volunteers around town have created the Earth Week events for Nelson, and there's some really awesome things. There's really something for everyone there, families, seniors, and everyone in between. So please check out their website at earthweeknelson.ca.
55th anniversary.
The 55th, thank you. I knew 50 was a little while ago, but I couldn't remember. 55th anniversary of Earth Day. And now here in Nelson, we have expanded that to Earth Week. I know there is an event out at Tagum Hall on this Saturday, and then things start whipping around here in Nelson, so I'll just refer you to that. I do have, and there's a big parade on the Sunday when we get back from AKBLG. I also just have a question, so this isn't really part of a report, but maybe it's a request. I have noticed that I really loved the one request we got for the Ready Grant funding around bicycle safety, because as the streets have been cleared and the e-bikes have been coming out, I have noticed many individuals riding their e-bikes at somewhat breakneck speeds, which I believe, is there a bylaw against that? Yeah.
Yes, it's a road, all e-bikes are supposed to follow the Motor Vehicle Act.
Yeah.
Nobody under
So
the
that's a
age
police thing.
16 and older is required to ride most of the e-bikes that are here in town. There are lower speed e-bikes that you could be 14, but it's pretty easy to gerrymander with the regulator on the bike to make it go faster.
Fast.
So I would say there are not a majority, but there are many people that are under the age of 14 that are riding e-bikes. And I think one of the things that isn't contemplated very much about e-bikes is they are very heavy. And so I see, because I live on such a steep street, I see lots of little, I wanna say 75-pound children riding big, tricked out e-bikes and sometimes out of control because of the fact that, just because of the weight of the bike, they're having a hard time. For anybody that's ridden a motorcycle, it takes a lot to sort of steer a heavy bike, and that's the same sort of weight ratio thing that's going on there on those e-bikes, and they're going down the road looking like they're all impaired, right? Because it does take a bit of control to control the bike, so.
So my request is there a time period when we can direct, I was thinking bylaw, but maybe police, to just be part of the educational process? And I think you probably, I don't know, I'm not close to teenagers anymore, but maybe being stopped once or twice when you're a gaggle of 6 or 8 bikes riding in the dark with no lights on might be enough to share that educational process. But I think it's one of those things that the sooner we get that information communicated, the better. And I'm also presuming that bylaw is also focused on helping people understand their garbage commitments around this time of year too. As we know, the bear community is coming up, so I don't know if they're doing scans of specific areas to make sure that people remember from year to year that the garbage cannot be out.
Trick is that bylaw, of course, is complaint driven, so that's always a bit tough. I don't know when WildSafe would normally be doing that work, and I don't know,
What about
their
the
money
bikes,
keeps
though,
being
then?
cut back, and I just don't know when WildSafe is actually starting up. We should probably find that date.
Yeah, I just wish we could be proactive around some of these things, because I think the dollar invested in proactivity is worth the $10 in.
Yeah, and that's understandable,
So the
Councillor.
follow-up
It's
and-
just that, the bylaw, we can't change I guess we could rewrite the bylaw, but bylaws are always complaint driven, and I'm sure the Bear Aware group will be out and doing more Facebook posts and Instagram posts and being at the market, which is always a good place to share this information. But I will bring up again with police, again with the shortages, I've asked them several times about doing some, you only have to stop a few children or adults a few times, and maybe the word will spread that there is risk of ticketing and such for not riding your bike properly and not having it decked out properly, riding without a helmet. And they're well aware of the ask is there, cause I keep asking for it, but I will ask again at the next meeting, but because of the short staffness, it's very difficult to be doing those additional sort of tasks at this time, but if they can get up to speed, if they get the RCMP in, that'll be great projects again for them to be doing some of that sort of stop and go education within the city limits.
Possibly ask, is that on Ursu's radar? I saw,
The
I
garbage.
think when we,
Yeah, I'll reach
not
out.
the garbage, but the cycling.
Oh, the URSA, yeah, like I don't know whether or not they, I don't know whether the integrated team does that in town, but
Well, I saw them at the beginning.
yeah, I was gonna say that they were in,
That was an Ursu.
okay,
Yeah.
cause I don't know who they'd
So
stop
they're in
there, but I
Ursu
saw that,
doing
yeah.
that, yeah, and I don't, yeah.
URSA is the integrated road safety team, for anybody that doesn't know the acronym.
But they're not based here, you're saying,
They do the region,
They do the.
so they do include the city of Nelson as
Okay.
part of
Yeah.
that region, yeah.
so we can make a request.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can see where
Okay,
we can
there.
try to,
That's
see where
my
we can try to
request.
pick it up more about the cycle.
Cause that's what they are,
Just-
about road
it's,
safety, right?
Yeah, I'm walking down the street in the dark sometime and they're there just, it's relatively quiet until they're like 10 feet or 20 feet away from you, and by then it's like.
Yeah.
So I don't walk up the hill in the dark with my headphones in anymore, it's just not worth it.
Do you have lights on?
When I'm walking, well, I generally have one of my reflective things
Yeah,
on, because I did just about get hit in one of our crosswalks one time, but.
I would be interested, if we look into it, I'd be interested to know if we're seeing additional accidents up at coming through the emergency ward or coming through interior health stats. Like at this point, we've been pushing active transportation. It's been a policy point of this council and the city to build up infrastructure and build up programming. We're trying to drive a certain percentage rate. I'd love to know if we're seeing any kind of hits above and beyond the medium or the baseline coming through interior health for accidents. Like I think that's where it's gonna show up more than it's gonna show up on our police stats.
Yeah,
Just to know how the scope of the problem.
I mean, in late March, NPD put out, I sent it to the mayor to be able to share, but they put out their weekly police report and it had that list of all of that stuff. So, I thought that I saw it in the paper, but maybe not. But they could publish that larger list. I'm not sure, it's an interesting question you have about, do we see more of that? I can tell you anecdotally, I grew up at the top of Nelson. And like grinding up those hills from soccer practice, a couple times a week, I dreamed of something like an e-bike, but it was more like a hoverboard back.
It's the going down though,
Going down is easy,
going
but
down,
it's
going down is a problem on the
fast.
e-bike.
You're
Going
getting up
down
to
was always
40,
fast.
50K.
Yeah.
well,
going
and you
down
were
is
going
ridiculous.
down on a normal bike anyways, but now you can fly up too, right?
Yeah, but you don't have the weight in a normal bike generally.
Wow.
You hit somebody
You
in
got
one of those
caliper brakes.
e-bikes.
You don't, right?
Yeah,
No, that's true.
All right, we will check.
so
into
I
that.
will,
I'm
and I will see if I can get some stats from IHA. They're not very forthcoming on sharing any statistics on very many things, but I will flag that for my next discussion there as to see whether or not there's more, but I can tell you over the years, I've treated multiple injuries of people coming down, particularly Stanley at very high speeds, and I have had my share of single and double wrist fractures of people coming off the front end of their bikes going downhill. Anybody else have anything else that they have on the list? I just have a couple of things, and one is just to remember to vote. So that's coming up. It'll all be over by the time we meet again. So,
tomorrow.
Except for tomorrow.
Other than
and tomorrow I'm not doing a council report. So advanced voting, Councillor Page tells me is actually this Friday and Monday, so on the 2 statutory holiday days, with regular voting on April the 28th, so that time is almost over. Just want to remind people that in general that vandalizing electoral signs is a crime.
Criminal offense.
So, you might not like, somebody or party or whatever, but it's part of, the democratic process, and I guess some people might feel that part of the democratic process is to go and vandalize the signs, but they did cost people money, so I would encourage to not be stealing signs, vandalizing signs. You know, if you maybe ask to have the person move their sign, I mean, but, and then, I don't know if anybody else was on it, I was on the webinar presented by the West Coast Environmental Law on climate litigation, which was very interesting, last week, and I'm doing some follow-up work with, I believe, Adrian Carr is gonna contact me about something. And then trying to look at things coming forward, so we have the election, but the other thing, I just wanna remind people who have children, or I guess now Councillor Payne, you can bring the grandbaby, is on Saturday, the Rotary Clubs will be hosting their Easter egg hunt. Activities start at 9 and there's gonna be face painting, there's gonna be hot dogs, there's gonna be an Easter bonnet parade. And the first little group of 0 to 2s get to come out to grab their Easter eggs, starting at about 10:45, and then there's little ages going up of people when they can do their Easter egg hunt. And it's a fun time, so fingers crossed that the weather on Saturday down at Lakeside Park is good, but it's a whole family affair, so come down when you can, but there's no Easter egg hunt for those of us who are over 12.
What if you're over a certain age? Do you
I mean,
get
over
back in?
12, yeah, you don't get back in, there's no
Slows
seniors,
down.
there's no senior. The eights are on the ground, Kevin, there could be a limitation to being able to pick them up, so.
The 10-year-old one is honestly over in like 7 seconds.
Oh, yeah, it's the best is the 0 to
They
2s.
could clean their rooms like that, it would be amazing, right?
Yeah, the 0s to 2 are the best, but yeah, and I love the ones that pick up those little eggs and they pull them open because they think there's something in there and there's nothing there, and they throw it over their shoulders, so it's a lot of fun to come and watch, so that's all the report I had, so if I could have a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor Porter, seconded by Councilor Page, all those in favor, and that carries.
Everyone?
Sorry I didn't get in.
Oh, it's okay. I had an important thing to do.